He's worried the announcement is rushed.
There is actually quite a lot of harm that can go with this as well. And there are a lot of ways it can push teenage social media activity offline and into hidden groups. This bill won't try to govern messaging services like WhatsApp or Telegram or Discord. It's a lot harder to monitor. By its very design, it can't have safety functions.
Elon Musk has claimed the move is censorship, with the real goal to track everyone. Kanishka Narayan, the Minister for AI and Online Safety, told LBC that's false.
We are not mandating digital ID. There's this conspiracy theory going around. In some cases, if you've had an account, for example, for more than 15 years or so, it's very easy to tell that you're over 16. If you've had a credit card associated, you can tell you're over 16. If you have an email address that's been in place for longer than 16 years, you can tell it as well. If that doesn't work, you can do aspects of facial recognition.
The Tories and Lib Dems say the decision has taken too long. Reforms say a ban is unlikely to work, and the Greens say it could leave children from minority groups more isolated. You can put your questions on the ban to the Technology Secretary Liz Kendall in Call the Cabinet tomorrow morning with Nick Ferrari here on LBC. Donald Trump says the Strait of Hormuz is already partially open to shipping. The US president claims the key trade route will be fully restored on Friday when the framework for peace with Iran is signed. The deal had been designed to include Lebanon, but Israel says it will continue to station forces in the country. Former US Defense Secretary and CIA Chief Leon Panetta told LBC it's all very tenuous.
We've virtually given Iran total control of the Straits of Hormuz, which gives them a tremendous amount of leverage and a tremendous influence in the Middle East for the future. Israel is not part of this agreement. They've made that clear. And if they're not part of this agreement, I'm not sure you can hold a ceasefire together.
A teacher has been found guilty of sexually assaulting and then murdering a baby in Blackpool. 37-year-old teacher Jamie Varley had adopted Preston Davey. His partner has been convicted of allowing the death of the child and sexual assault. DCI Andy Fellows is from Lancashire Police.
Jamie Varley's actions are despicable, the heinous crimes that he's committed. I would describe him as a man who is a manipulator, a serial liar, somebody who's sought to frustrate the inquiry. He is a dangerous man. Jamie Varley is evil, in my opinion.
The Court of Appeals ruled the government acted lawfully when it banned the protest group Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation. Almost 120 arrests have been made in London following today's decision of people suspected of showing the group support.
We need to get back to a free, independent country where people are treated properly and respectfully.
Palestine Action is not a terrorist organisation.
If a few people doing a peaceful protest can undermine the security of the nation, it doesn't say much for the security of the nation.
And footballing minnows Cape Verde have frustrated Spain at the World Cup. The third smallest nation to ever play at the tournament have held the European Championship winners to a goalless draw. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 35 points at 10,435. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.16. LBC weather, cloud increasing this evening with showery rain in the north and west at times, clear spells elsewhere and lows of 8 to 16 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Matt Hewitt.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Simon Marks.
Good evening to all of you. I'm in for Ian Dale for the next fortnight, Monday through Thursday from 7 till 10 with Rachel Johnson here, of course, on Friday nights. It's great to be with you, whether you're listening to us on the radio or watching us in glorious Technicolor via Global Player, the LBC app, or our YouTube channel. You can find that by going to YouTube and searching for LBC Official. Coming up tonight after the news at 9, we're going to look at the Prime Minister's reported plans to dilute his targets to get as many of us as possible driving electric cars. Is it the beginning of the end for the government's commitment to net zero? Should it be, at a time when Number 10 is looking for spare cash to pay for more defence? If you are a petrol head, it may be modestly welcome news, but if you're an environmentalist, almost certainly not. We will talk about it in our final hour together this evening. At 8, it's tonight's edition of Cross Question. On the panel tonight, Alex Ballinger, Labour MP for Hales Owen, Sir John Hayes, Conservative MP for South Holland and the Deepings, Ellie Chowns, Green Party MP for North Herefordshire, and Alistair Downer, the former Australian Foreign Minister. Great night to have him on. All of them taking your questions for the full hour about whatever is on your mind this evening. We will also find time tonight to remember two iconic figures, both of whom have passed away. Roy Hattersley, a towering figure within the Labour Party. He was 93. And Roger Cook, the investigative reporter and consumer crusader. His death was announced today at 83. More on both of them a little bit later. This hour, though, the Prime Minister's big announcement of the day.
Do we truly believe that social media creates a happy environment for our children?
Sir Keir Starmer saying this morning that the answer to that question is an overwhelming no. And so, just months after he said he opposed the idea of blanket bans, he unveiled one. The under-16s will be blocked from social media by government order as soon as possible.
I want this message to be heard loud and clear. I am not prepared to compromise on the safety and happiness of our children. And that is why this ban must happen, and that is why this ban will happen.
He said he accepted that social media has some positive attributes, but not enough to justify the damage companies are doing to young minds across the UK. It never used to be like this, he said, and he spoke wistfully about what our society has lost.
I feel for this generation. I think back to my own childhood. And yes, the early 1970s weren't always a picnic. But we didn't have to deal with anything like this. A technology that intrudes into every corner of a life.
And on this issue, broad support from the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, and also a claim to a bit of the credit.
It's only happened because Conservatives in the Lords put down amendments which they won. They're now part of those bills. And I think it's very important that we take that win. It is imperfect because he's only picked a select number of social media companies, but the biggest ones are on there, so I'm glad of that.
From the other political parties, a mixed bag. Reform UK opposes the ban. Nigel Farage saying it won't work because of the mass adoption of VPNs. The Lib Dems leader, Sir Ed Davey, called the Prime Minister's proposal half-baked. The party favours a film-style age rating system for platforms instead of a blanket ban. The Greens said they welcome actions to address the harms that social media companies do to youngsters, but said stronger safeguards are needed to avoid leaving some young people isolated and cut off from support. The Prime Minister conceded that many children will find ways around the ban and said that even if legislation is prioritised, it may only come into effect next spring. This hour, we want to hear your views. Is this a prudent move that is going meaningfully to change life within your family? Is it an infringement on freedom of speech? I don't believe so, but maybe you do. Should the government have gone further? I mean, seriously, if it's harmful to the under-16s, why is it demonstrably not harmful to all of us? Why can't we go back to the 1970s or even the 1980s when governments protected us from the kind of content that I would argue none of us needs to see or benefits in any meaningful way from seeing? You can join the conversation by calling 0345 6060 973. It's the same number for WhatsApp as it is for the phones. You can also text us at 84850. To begin our conversation tonight, I'm joined here in our Westminster studio by Lord Nash, the Conservative peer and former Under-Secretary of State for Schools, who steered calls for a social media ban for the under-16s through the House of Lords, and you heard him being credited there by Kemi Badenoch. His amendment would force the government to raise the minimum age for children accessing social media platforms to 16 within 12 months. Lord Nash, thank you so much for being with us here tonight. I know this is a day of triumph in many ways because you, as Kemi Badenoch was indicating in her comments today, battled very hard to bring this about. Why do you believe this ban is so important?
Because we know that children are seeing some very harmful content, and particularly in relation to the point you made about whether it should be for everybody, we know that the 13, 14, 15-year age group for children is when they're particularly vulnerable. Their minds are still very much in formation. They're also very prone to take risks and be easily influenced. So I think it's particularly for that period of their lives that we need to protect them from influence. And also, of course, we know that many of them are contacting strangers or being contacted by strangers.
We heard from the Prime Minister today that the best case scenario for this ban being introduced and implemented is next spring. Is that not a long time for young minds to continue to be polluted?
Well, Liz Kendall said in the House of Commons this afternoon, very early next year. But they've got to get the regulations right. They've got to get Ofcom organised to do it properly. I think we should take the win. I think we're pleased with the outcome. And I'd like to thank actually LBC for supporting this campaign from the get-go. You've been terrific. And I think the government have done a good job. They've listened to the consultation and they've actually gone further than my amendment would have proposed.
Can I put to you what Elon Musk said today over his social media platform X? First of all, he reposted a claim by one of X's users who says it's important to know that the social media ban for the under-16s is not a ban for the under-16s. It is a ban on selected social media for everyone unless you identify yourself. To which Mr. Musk then added, this censorship law, that's what he's calling it, is a wolf in sheep's clothing. The real goal is to enable the UK government to track everyone.
Well, I just don't agree with that. In fact, the age verification is pretty straightforward. The social media companies know exactly what you're doing online, what I'm doing. They can pin our ages down to within a couple of years. So they're not going to ask the entire population to identify themselves. They're only going to ask those people who they believe are on the margins of 16, so probably no later than 20.
Do you accept that someone turns 17, they're through the media ban, suddenly they're able to immerse themselves in a world of social media? The stuff that's on social media that is bad for a 16-year-old is certainly still bad for a 17-year-old. Arguably, it's bad for a 27-year-old, a 37-year-old and a 47-year-old. Why not just go further and ban this altogether?
Well, maybe that's a nice idea, but it's just not going to happen. I mean, the trend around the world is 16. And in fact, the government have now said they'll ban romanticised or sexualised chat box up to 18. And they also said that by default, stranger pairing and live streaming will be banned for 16 and 17-year-olds to give them a bit of a bridge so it won't be a cliff edge. So I think that's just not realistic.
Lord Nash, stay with me if you will, because we're also joined this evening by Annunziata Rees-Mogg, a political commentator and head of communications for the Popular Conservatism Campaign Group. Annunziata Rees-Mogg, thanks very much indeed for taking time to be with us this evening. You, I know, are passionately opposed to the plan that the government has unveiled today. Why?
I think it's unworkable. I think it has a lot of unintended consequences that are very damaging to our children. And I think ultimately it should be parents that parent their children, not the government. And this is a very clunky mechanism that's already being shown not to work in Australia, but seems to be pretty much a copy and paste, where there's a will, there's a way, as my 15-year-old has said to me today. The teenagers have found ways around the ban. Therefore, anyone who was wanting to flout it has and can. Those who haven't managed that are becoming increasingly isolated socially, because so much of our teenagers' social lives is online. And I think we have to accept where the world is and make it safer, not try and pretend these things don't exist and then launch them on unprepared 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds when they turn a birthday.
When you say parents must be allowed to parent, parents in their hundreds of thousands are calling for action on social media. Parents are in large numbers saying, we can't police this ourselves, we need government help.
Which I can't begin to understand. It is the job of parents to keep their children safe. We teach children to cross roads. Roads fundamentally are dangerous and crossing them is dangerous, but we teach them to do it safely. And we are there with them making sure they can. And teaching children to have responsible usage is absolutely vital. And my 15-year-old, I have absolute oversight of what she does. She's on my Apple account. I have controls. But she also talks to me and shows me if there's anything vaguely inappropriate. But it's led to her last 2 paid holiday jobs. It's how she interacts with all her friends outside of school, particularly because we are very rural. There is no easy meet-up mechanism as an alternative. It's where they find jobs. It's where she does so much of her GCSE revision on YouTube videos, that kind of thing, not least because her teachers send her there.
But it was very clear from what the Prime Minister announced today that there are going to be carve-outs made for platforms that provide educational information for children.
YouTube, he said YouTube Kids, and that's not going to help if what you're studying is the Wild West in America as part of your history GCSE. That a lot of these videos are also done by other youngsters saying, here's how I understood this. Here's how it worked for me. And I think that's incredibly useful for children as a mechanism of learning. But also they teach themselves other things. My daughter is completely horse mad, doesn't have one at the moment. She would love a horse. She looks at horses, but she also learns a huge amount about horsemanship that she can't do at school and is not part of her formal education.
But it's not an internet ban. It's a ban on being able to access social media platforms that traffic in absolutely pernicious content.
Some of the content is pernicious. Yes, absolutely. And it is parents' jobs to make sure they teach their children how to keep themselves safe. And that is our role. It is our responsibility. And it is to teach them to be responsible adults themselves, not to be nannied by an overarching state that then does want all adults to provide ID that they are over 16 or 18 for the different bans being proposed. And you can say till the cows come home that the technology companies have the methods to do that. My daughter told me 2 days ago about a great friend of hers who is 16 and was asked to verify that she was over 13 for a particular platform. And it said, don't worry about verifying, we can see you're 19. Well, she's not. She's 16. They don't always get it right. And if they don't get it right, they will be prosecuted. Therefore, they will bring in compulsory ID.
And Nunziata Rees-Mogg, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme tonight. Lord Nash, let me end with you. I mean, again, there is the argument that this is an effort by the back door, by the government, to create a situation where everybody is going to have to prove that they are over the age of 16.
Well, I don't agree. I've spoken to the tech companies and they're quite clear that they really make the effort. They can do this. She makes the point about Australia, a lot of kids getting round it. Well, the reason why they're getting round it in Australia, as the e-safety commissioner there has pointed out recently, is that the social media companies are not doing their job properly. They haven't really been trying hard enough. They also have a much lower bar in Australia than we're having here. They have reasonable steps. We're having highly effective. And highly effective age verification can be done. So I think that's not a strong argument.
And if those social media companies don't do it, what do you then do to them?
Well, under the Online Safety Act, which this legislation is linked into, they can technically be fined up to 10% of their worldwide revenue or actually taken off air in this country.
Lord Nash, thanks very much indeed for being with us tonight. I know you've worked very hard on this and there's going to be more hard work in the months ahead. That's Lord Nash, the Conservative peer and former Education Minister, who has been steering the social media ban on the under-16s through the House of Lords. Now it's over to you. We want your views on this. You can call me at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. The time is now 7:20.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
Why do you need consultation? Who's going to say no?
Straight to the point.
Let's see. And
But why let's see? This is what I don't understand.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Why won't they listen to the most successful living Labour Prime Minister? Arguably the most successful Labour Prime Minister of all time.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store.
Get iPhone 17 in the Vodafone Business Summer Sale. iPhone 17 is built for business with all
Hi Simon, I'm 13. How's your day been?
My day has been all right, thanks, but how has your day been with news of the fact that by next spring... All right, thanks, but how has your day been with news of the fact that by next spring you might be banned from social media?
Well, to be honest, I'm quite glad because I've lost, well, I say lost. Quite a lot of my friends have been sucked into their phones and haven't been focusing on life, exams, school. And I've actually been doing homework today at school, and there were lots of people that put their phones behind their laptops so the teacher couldn't see, and we're just scrolling on TikTok.
Extraordinary. And is that commonplace in your school?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite normal, especially from the cool kids, all of those people. They're just scrolling on TikTok. And yeah, I just find it that they're wasting crucial parts of their life because they could be revising. They have exams in, I think they have one tomorrow, actually, and they're just scrolling.
So how do you regulate your own social media use, Charlie?
Well, my parents have actually been very good with my screen time limits. So when I first got my phone, they were quite strict with my limits. So I think I had half an hour of YouTube per day, and that was just YouTube Shorts, whatever I really wanted on YouTube. And then I have WhatsApp, and that's really it on my phone. But then I've recently lost my phone, actually, in Tenerife. So, yeah, but since I've lost it, even without half an hour of it a day, I've noticed that I'm a lot better with revision. I'm more focused at school. I don't get distracted. I don't fidget much. It's improved my life, really.
And as news spread among your friends today that the Prime Minister was making this announcement, I'm assuming news did spread among them. What was their reaction to it?
So it was quite a mixed reaction. So one of my friends, who I'm not going to name, obviously, but they're one of the most clever people I know. They're so clever. And he wants to be the Prime Minister, actually, surprisingly enough. But he said that he's properly glad because he hasn't even got a phone. And the people that are mean to him have phones. They're absolutely addicted. And he said he wants them to suffer. But for him, he's excited. He thinks, again, it's a bit like me because his friends have not been on their bikes, going outside, doing what kids used to do. And they've actually just been scrolling on their phones, just watching TV, which, I mean, it's fair enough at the end of the day, but it's not throughout the weekends. That's just all they do. And some of my friends were slightly disheartened, or I don't know what the word is, but they were sad because they enjoy watching social media, which I understand. However, I think they also need to enjoy the values of life, which isn't just social media.
Charlie, I'm enormously grateful to you for calling in. One of our listeners has texted in to say that LBC should buy you a new phone for an outstanding first call. So you've got fans out there, Charlie, and thank you very much indeed for sharing your experience and the experiences of your friends as they heard today about that proposed social media ban by the Prime Minister. Let's go to Christine, who's on the phone this afternoon, this evening even, from Crouch End. Evening to you, Christine.
Oh, good evening, Simon. What a wise young...
Very much so, absolutely.
Oh, I'm just amazed. Right, now, people managed years ago for thousands of years, and they were intelligent and they learnt. And 70 years ago, Mary Whitehouse was saying about all this stuff, and I think Roy Hattersley agreed with her after a while. And in the old days...
Well, wait a minute. Mary Whitehouse couldn't have been talking about social media, could she?
No, but she was talking about the violence and the inappropriate
on
stuff
television, on
TV.
media more broadly, on old-style media. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, but that old-style media has morphed.
No, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes. So, and I totally agree with you that if it's not good enough for a 16-year-old, then if a person turns 17 one day later, I don't think it's good enough for them either. Yes, that's the thing. It's not good enough. The standards should be higher and better. And years ago, the porn used to be on the top shelf. And the big tech companies, they don't care. They don't care what effects, what they put out. All they're interested in is the big money. And sometimes when I'm going down the road, I see people on bikes. They're on their mobile phones. And sometimes people are almost walking in front of you. They're so addicted to their mobile phones. So I think what you said, we would all be better off and it would be cheaper and people would be safer in all ways if we didn't have all this violence and porn and inappropriate stuff in our media.
Yeah, I mean, with regard to the pornography, I mean, the government's already taken steps with regard to trying to restrict access to that because there is already now age verification required for those sites. And of course, people find ways of getting around it. But the Prime Minister conceded today that kids will find a way of getting around this. But you think it's still absolutely worth a go and you would expand it further?
They're trying to do something, so they don't have the power to do something. So I don't think porn is right for anybody, for 19-year-olds or 90-year-olds or 19-year-olds. I don't think it's appropriate for anybody. And it's been well proven that there's a link between what people watch and between what people do. So as for porn, surely it's so old-fashioned. I mean, why haven't we banned it? We've banned smoking in public places. Surely porn is evil. Why haven't we banned it?
Christine, thanks very much indeed for calling in. There are lots of you calling in who disagree and think that this social media ban is the wrong way to go. And we'll be hearing from several of those callers and texters to the programme still to come. You're welcome to join the conversation at 0345 6060 973, or you can text 84850. The Prime Minister, President Trump and other world leaders are gathered for the G7 summit in France tonight. We're going to find out what President Trump has been saying about his peace deal with Iran in a moment. But first, with the time at 7:30, the news headlines from Matt Hewitt.
The Tech Secretary Liz Kendall's told the Commons social media will be banned for under 16s because parents are crying out for change. She says the ban will set a new social norm for future generations when it comes in next spring. Donald Trump says an agreement to end the US war with Iran is all signed and the Strait of Hormuz will be completely open by Friday. He said Tehran's committed not to have a nuclear weapon and this will be strongly policed. And a high school teacher from Blackpool's been found guilty of the murder and sexual abuse of a baby he and his partner were adopting. Preston Davey died in 2023, aged 13 months. LBC weather, cloud increasing this evening with showery rain in the north and west at times. Clear spells elsewhere and lows of 8 to 16 degrees.
LBC.
Psst. Hey dogs. Yeah, I'm talking to you. If you're tired of dry, tasteless kibble or slop that plops out
8 o'clock. We're going to come back to your calls and texts in a moment, but the Prime Minister, President Trump and other world leaders are in France tonight in Evian for a G7 summit that is now going to be dominated by news of the apparent agreement by the US and Iran. They will sign a deal that will extend their current ceasefire in the conflict. Top Trump administration officials are heralding the agreement as historic. Here's the way Vice President J.D. Vance described it on CBS earlier today.
What this agreement does is really twofold. On the one hand, it ensures that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon while simultaneously opening the Strait of Hormuz.
Now, let's just stop him there to reflect on the fact that before this conflict began, Iran had already committed never to develop a nuclear weapon. American intelligence had concluded that they had not restarted their nuclear program. And, of course, that Strait of Hormuz, well, it was open, and we were all paying far less for petrol than we are tonight. Anyway, back to the Vice President.
It also, Gail, fundamentally extends a hand to Iran and says, look, if you guys are willing to honor your obligations, if you're willing to allow real inspections of your nuclear program, then we will welcome you back into the world economy.
Welcome you back into the world economy. Unwelcome news there for opponents of the Iranian regime, who must now realize that President Trump simply wants to strike a deal with Iran's hardline clerical government, let the oil flow, as he said last night, and move on. Joining me now is Halle Blake, British-Iranian human rights activist and co-founder of United for Masa, a non-partisan social activist group. Halle Blake, it's very good to see you again. You and I spoke here on LBC last week, which is why I'm delighted that you're back with us tonight. Because then it wasn't entirely clear what sort of an agreement the US and the Iranian regime were striking. Now it's increasingly clear that this is an agreement that requires the Iranian people essentially to continue being ruled by the brutal regime under whose yoke they have suffered for the past 47 years. What's your view of this now?
Nothing has changed from when we spoke last week, but what has changed is that there is now a memorandum of understanding now signed between the Islamic Republic and the US. Obviously, as we mentioned before, the Iranian people were not at the table. Their representatives are not at the table. So they're completely being left out of this deal. So nothing has changed. Strait of Hormuz hasn't opened. There are obviously discussions. This allows for 60 days of negotiations for a so-called new deal between the Islamic Republic and the US. But this doesn't guarantee any change. If the DNA of this regime doesn't change over negotiations, that has been going on for 47 years. What's going to happen is if Trump decides to do the actual deal and sign that final deal, he will just kick the can down the road again. And you are going to see more uprising, more Iranians killed. And some Iranians are disappointed, but I believe they're reading headlines rather than what is actually happening. Obviously, you've got the World Cup. You've also got the midterm elections. So I believe Trump is still trying to buy time, but we're going to see what happens next.
But there's no indication that the Iranian people are going to be represented around that table during the 60 days of negotiations. So there can't really, on your part, be any sense that this is going to bring about meaningful political change in Iran. I mean, the days of President Trump back on February the 28th saying to the Iranian people, now's your chance, stand up, take control, control your own destiny. I mean, that's all ancient history now, isn't it?
No, it's not for Iranians. It's not. They're going to come out when they're ready to come out, because they will not come out empty-handed this time, because they were met with militia and freelance killers. So what's going to change now, as you said, Iranians are not at this table, at this negotiating table. This is exactly why these negotiations are going to fail, for two reasons. The Islamic Republic has never honored any of its negotiations or any of its deals. And two, the Iranian people will prevail. And that's how the deals were not going to make any change.
So your hope in this is that the 60 days of negotiations collapse, whereas President Trump's hope is that he secures a deal, because he seems increasingly anxious to find an off-ramp, and one that basically sees him and the Iranian regime going into partnership together, certainly as far as the country's oil industry is concerned.
Look, it's taken the Iranians a long time to trust an American president after what Carter did. So for them to come to this stage and support any sort of action, and for our US president to take really stern action, they know that there may be something else at play. So all hopes is not lost. There's still no real leader present or visible. Mojtaba Khamenei has been missing since 28th of February. So we believe that Trump is trying to stabilize the markets, let the oil flow, ease some pressure from the rest, and then perhaps even recoup and re-energize. And obviously the regime will also do the same. But there is no deal. For Iranians, there is no deal. And there is no deals because the Iranians are not in it.
Halle Blake, thanks very much indeed for joining us once again on LBC. Halle Blake is a British-Iranian human rights activist and co-founder of United for Mahsa, a non-partisan social activist group. That, of course, a reference to Mahsa Amini, the young Iranian student who was killed by the country's Revolutionary Guards and secret police for failing to wear her hijab correctly. Let's go back to our conversation now about the Prime Minister's proposal to ban social media for the under-16s. He says it will be on the statute books by next spring. Lord Nash was telling us earlier on the programme that he's been told by Liz Kendall that it could be very early in the new year. Alex has called into the programme from Edinburgh. Good evening, Alex. What would you like to say?
Good evening. I think this is the nanny state at its absolute worst. I don't see why the adult population has to be inconvenienced by this because of people's shambolic parenting.
In what way is this going to inconvenience you, Alex?
Okay, so I don't see why I should have to supply a passport, driving license, something like that, to use various internet sites. Why do I have to hand over sensitive information to third parties to process?
Well, first of all, there's no indication yet that that is what you would be required to do. I mean, many of these platforms already have software where they grab a quick snap of your face, conclude that you are indeed, certainly in my case, over the age of 16. They don't keep the picture, but they then clear you to use the platform.
Well, that's not necessarily true, because if you look at the Online Safety Act, where we have had to have age verification already, we were assured that these services were secure, and there have already been multiple leaks where companies were meant to have deleted data, hundreds of thousands of users, pictures, IDs, personal information was leaked. And just getting back to the point when it comes to the parents, if people want to keep their kids safe online, they can do it today with the settings built into a phone. So my nephew, he's 14. His dad has it set up that all of the apps on the phone are restricted, so he can't go into the App Store and download something like Snapchat. Certain apps he can only use for certain hours a day. Adult content is blocked on the device, so that means even if he's using a VPN, he cannot access adult content, and his daily usage and web browsing history are all emailed to his dad. Why do we need these extra measures when such a system is already in place?
Well, because there are some parents that struggle with that technology. It's far from evident that every single device currently has access to all of those technological tools. And if you think that kids are going to find a way of getting around a ban on social media, they'll certainly find a way of getting around those tools. I mean, what I don't understand about your position is why it's not worth... You and me, you know, we're adults. Why is it not worth making what seems to me to be a pretty minimal sacrifice, given that I assume that half my data is already in the hands of these big tech behemoths? Why is it not worth making a small sacrifice in order to save the under-16s? And I think far many more people than that should be saved from the pernicious material in which these tech giants are trafficking.
But it's not a small sacrifice. It's an enormous sacrifice, because it's a slippery slope that we are massively on. Because it's not inconceivable that in a couple of elections' time, if we have a nasty regime in office, they will use the tools and capabilities and legislation that has been slowly introduced to clamp down on our freedom of speech. Why do the majority of the adult population have to suffer? I mean, if parents are struggling to use these tools, they can literally walk into an Apple store and be told how to set it up. And the parent's Apple account is superior to that of the child's. The child cannot override these settings. And what's being proposed is a half measure. Technologically, it's not going to work because many kids will find a way around it. The on-device settings are much, much harder to bypass. So once again, the government's not really going to fully achieve what they want to, but they're going to massively inconvenience the rest of us and slowly over time, erode our freedom of speech and make it easier for the government to snoop on us. When it comes to the big tech companies, I choose what data I send to them. I can make an anonymous account on Reddit, Facebook, whatever. I don't have to use my real information. But we're getting to the point where we are going to have to start uploading more and more personal information just to use these basic services. The Soviet Union would be proud of this. It's disgusting. And I hope people wake up and realize what this actually is about. And it's not about keeping kids safe online because, you know what, these devices, they already have the tools built in. So if someone wants to be a good parent, go and learn how to use the settings on the devices because it's far superior than what's been proposed today.
Alex, thanks very much indeed. Advice to parents from Alex in Edinburgh. Let me know what you think about what he has just said. You can call us at 0345 6060 973. In a moment, we're going to hear from a caller who is a parent and who is happy about the government's announcement today. You're listening to Simon Marks in for Ian Dale here on LBC. Coming up.
What was your screen time over the weekend?
9 hours.
9 hours. So suddenly you're going to have a lot more time to fill. And what will you do?
Stare at a wall.
That's a schoolgirl speaking to a reporter earlier today. Does she have your sympathy, or is staring at a wall better than staring at social media? More of your calls and texts to come. It's 7:45.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
If it was a U-turn from the Prime Minister as he announced a social media ban for under-16s, was it a U-turn you wanted?
Social media is making children unhappy. It's making it easier for bullies to harass and abuse them. And it could even be harming their mental health.
Tomorrow, in the LBC exclusive Call the Cabinet, Technology Secretary Liz Kendall will be live in the studio to take your calls.
9 out of 10 parents who responded to the consultation say they want a blanket ban.
It's your chance to get your questions answered on the ban and what it means for children across the country.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Guys, gals and non-binary pals, we're Copperfield, the breast cancer awareness charity. This is your reminder to
They go on their bikes, they're quite outdoorsy anyways, but they do enjoy the apps. They have interest, shopping, etc. I'm quite tech savvy. I'd like to say I'm going to be 40 in a couple of months, so not over the hill just yet. But,
you're a young man, Nick.
Thank you, Simon. But and I've got a lot of kind of safeguards already applied to my phone, so I do as much as I can. They need to get my permission if they want to download things, etc. I think a previous caller had said parents should be less lazy and do more things for their kids, and they should restrict the amount of times that they are online. Well, I'd argue with them. The amount of time that they are online could be short. However, it's not necessarily the kids that are the issue that can find things away around it. It's those that we're looking to protect them from that could pursue such ways around it, even things that we aren't particularly privy to. And the main thing is making sure that they're safe and they're secure. The thing that I worry about all the time is, are they okay on it?
I think that's a really important point, because the Prime Minister was making the point today that this is the only medium that exists where anybody that is online can find a way of contacting anyone else who is online. So this goes beyond what they're seeing on X or YouTube or Snapchat or Instagram. This is about the danger that your kids can be in from predators who may choose to try and strike up a relationship with them.
Certainly, yes, and this can come from lots of different avenues, and a lot of it's just mimicking another child. And so even I won't get a notification if they're talking to someone on a game, per se. Certainly if they are on, online Insta or something. But if they're talking to someone on the game that they perceive to be their friend, or in a group of people playing a game, it could be something sparked up from that. And to be honest, I worry about that. I do ask them questions about who are you playing with? Are you online with this person? Are you online with that person? They're still children and they're still learning. So even with their best intentions, they believe it to be safe and they don't feel like they're in harm at that point. They may not see the bigger picture. And I feel like these safeguards are so paramount in implementing their absolute safety. It's certainly until they're at an age where they are, able to understand it to the best of their abilities, but also for us, adults as well. I think it's very good. I think a few people are worried about the online verification and such. I think there's a lot of people there and a lot of toxicity floating around the social media aspect, because a lot of people are safe and feel safe that they're not identified, and so they implement hatred and different views and of all sorts. And I'm not picking a side here, I'm just saying in general. I think a lot of people will be deterred from maybe being so extreme in their views if they thought there's a chance that actually I may have to answer for my questions in this, because there's a very viable chance that they may know who I am. I'm not fully leaning on that, but certainly
understood.
The safety of my children are absolutely paramount, and I welcome it. Fully.
Nick, thanks very much indeed. That's Nick in Manchester. From Manchester, we go to Muswell Hill, and Catherine is there this evening. Good evening, Catherine. What would you like to say?
Good evening, Simon. I want to address specifically what Annunciata Rees-Mogg was saying, and also I think your caller from Edinburgh, I think it might have been Henry. Both of them are advocating for a smaller state, essentially. We don't want the state interfering in our parenting responsibilities. I have children. I have 5 children, in fact. They're all adults now. 2 of them at least grew up without social media because of their ages, 3 of them with it. And I think the first thing to say is social media of itself is not the only harmful thing that kids can come across. I think there's a temptation in this conversation to think if we get rid of social media, we'll have happy 1950s children skipping around making daisy chains. Not necessarily. There's a lot of other stuff out there. But having said that, my youngest is 19, going to be 20 this year. I would have 100% welcomed this ban, not because it would have fixed all my problems, far from it, but because it would have been me working in conjunction with the state, Miss Annunciata Rees-Mogg. For example, she gave the example of it's up to parents to teach their children to cross the road. Yeah, it is. I did that. I'm sure she's done the same. But I also rely on the state to have safe roads, good lighting, speed control, speed bumps, etc., to assist me in that. And exactly the same applies with technology. It doesn't mean we abrogate our parenting responsibilities, but it means we work in conjunction with legislation so that we can together fly and make our children safer. And crucially, given that the social media ban will apply until age 16, those really formative years, neurologically speaking, when those young brains are forming, will allow those young years and young brains to develop in a way that is no one disputes that it's going to be more healthy. And Miss Rees-Mogg, spoke about her daughter's love of horses. I mean, the idea that you can't.
Yeah, no, but no one is proposing that Miss Rees-Mogg's daughters should not be able to continue learning about horses online. That's not what this social media ban is all about, as you know. Catherine, thanks very much indeed for calling in. I want to squeeze one more call in, and it's a first-time caller from Fleet in Hampshire. Vivian, good afternoon, good evening to you. What made you pick up the phone?
Hi, Simon. I just wanted to say, having listened to Ms. Rees-Mogg, she said, oh, yeah, it's up to parents to monitor their children, blah, blah, blah. However, a lot of children in this country have one parent at home. That parent may well be at work when they're in the house. Often the phone is the companion of those children. There's nobody going to be checking what they're looking at if mum or dad is at work. And it's ridiculous to say that the parents have to monitor it. There are a lot of homes where that's not going to happen because of absent parents. And that's basically what I want.
Well, Vivian, that's a very well taken point. What about her other concern, that this is the thin end of the wedge? This is the beginning, and we heard this also from one of our other callers earlier on the programme. This is the beginning of an effort that could lead government to get all sorts of information about anybody who is over the age of 16 and set the stage for tracking all of us.
Simon, it's out there anyway. We've all got credit cards, all sorts of things where they've got all your information. You've got a Waitrose loyalty card or whatever it is. They've got all that information anyway. So I personally don't. I'm not afraid of that. I don't have anything to hide. I don't care. So
and you would have no qualms about going through a process of age verification in order for you to use the accounts that you may currently use?
Not whatsoever. No. And I wonder how they're going to do age verification. I mean, I'm sure that's easy to falsify. If they're if you're under 16 and they're asking what your age is, I don't know what you have to produce, presumably not a driving licence, to prove that you're over 16.
Right. And of course, as the Prime Minister conceded today, any ban like this is going to find people, youngsters, finding ways of getting around it. But that is not necessarily a reason not to give it a go. Vivian, first-time caller from Hampshire, thanks very much indeed. I hope we will hear from you again here on LBC, and we're certainly going to continue this conversation about social media. But finally this hour, I wanted to spend some time remembering Roy Hattersley. His death was announced at the age of 93 today. He was a totemic figure in the Labour Party of the 1970s, 80s and 90s. Born in Sheffield, he represented Birmingham Sparkbrook in the Commons for 32 years. And going through the LBC archive today, I was struck by the fact that so many of his contributions to this radio station over the years reflected issues that we still talk about every day.
Lenin had a very famous essay about what the workers really wanted was competition, which smashed up the monopolies and made sure that profits were kept down to a minimum. And that, I think, is the right society for a democratic socialist like me.
In September 1978, Roy Hattersley was talking about Lenin there to LBC listeners, but don't let that fool you. He was really talking about the need for the left to find a way of coming to terms with the free market. 2 years earlier, Prime Minister James Callaghan chose him to become Secretary of State for Prices and Consumer Protection. Yeah, that was a real job. He did it with gusto.
Competition is what makes shops and factories and warehouses dependent on the customer. They have to do what the customer wants to get him in, because if they don't do what the customer wants, somebody else does what the customer wants and steals their business. And I think a society which is responsive to consumer needs is the sort of society a democratic socialist ought to try to create.
Just days after Kemi Badenoch and the Conservatives pledged to scrap the requirement for government departments and all public bodies to consider the impact of their policies on equality, Roy Hattersley would have vigorously disagreed with that. In 1981, he was arguing here on LBC that the country urgently needed positive discrimination to level the socio-economic playing field.
I believe that successive governments, Conservative and Labour, have done too little in the way of positive discrimination in favour of the deprived and underprivileged areas, done too little for the inner cities, and done too little for the black British.
As Neil Kinnock's deputy leader in the 1980s, Hattersley helped navigate the party's battle with Derek Hatton and militant tendency. He was never tempted to join the SDP when 4 of his Labour colleagues broke away from the party. He was, as Alistair Campbell noted today, Labour through and through. Lord Kinnock called him a socialist of deep conviction, a dedicated Democrat who believed liberty should be unqualified by anything but responsibility and never by background or fortune. Roy Hattersley, who's died at the age of 93. Into our next hour, and tonight's edition of Cross Question, your chance to put whatever question is on your mind this evening to our panel. Tonight, 3 members of Parliament and a former Australian Foreign Minister. I'll be joined here in the studio by Alex Ballinger, Labour MP for Hales-Owen, Sir John Hayes, Conservative MP for South Holland and the Deepings, Ellie Chowns, Green Party MP for North Herefordshire, and Alexander Downer, the former Australian Foreign Minister. What a night for him to be here as the Prime Minister announces an Australia-style social media ban for the under-16s. Perhaps you want to ask about that, or about the prospects for peace in Iran, or about today's ruling by the Court of Appeal that found the government's ban of Palestine action was lawful. Call us, text us, because on Cross Question, it's your question that drives the conversation.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the Prime Minister says under-16s will be banned from social media next spring. It'll mean they're prevented from having an account on platforms including TikTok and YouTube. Facebook, Instagram and Snapchat are also included, and warn that the move could encourage young people to visit unregulated areas of the internet. Jessica Butchers from social enterprise Scroll Aware. She's very happy with the decision.
I think we have to do it. It's like anything, right? It's like seatbelts, it's like alcohol, it's like smoking. There will always be children that will have access to these things. But it's about the message that it sends and about the line in the sand that we put for parents. And they're the ones that are calling out for this.
And you can put your questions on the ban to the Tech Secretary Liz Kendall in Call the Cabinet tomorrow morning with Nick Ferrari here on LBC. Donald Trump says a deal to end the war with Iran has been signed. Speaking in France ahead of the annual G7 summit, the US president again insisted Tehran won't have nuclear capabilities. The ceasefire deal has been agreed electronically and will be signed in person on Friday in Switzerland. A high school teacher has been found guilty of murdering his adopted baby son following months of sexual abuse. Jamie Varley is 37 and from Blackpool. Varley's partner was found guilty of allowing the death of a child, sexual assault and child cruelty. Wendy Logan's from the Crown Prosecution Service.
I welcome today's verdicts and can honestly say this has been one of the most shocking and horrific cases I have dealt with in my career. Jamie Varley and his partner were entrusted with the care of baby Preston. It is difficult to comprehend how the very people who should have protected him could inflict such sickening physical and sexual abuse on an innocent child.
Police say more than 100 arrests have been made on suspicion of showing support for Palestine action. A protest was held outside the Royal Courts of Justice after the decision to uphold the ban on the proscribed terrorist group. And Spain have been held to a shock goalless draw by Cape Verde in their opening match of the World Cup. The European champions entered the tournament as one of the favourites to lift the trophy, but were frustrated by a side 65 places below them in the rankings. It's Cape Verde's first ever point at a World Cup. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 35 points at 10,435. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.16. LBC weather, cloud increasing this evening with showery rain in the north and west at times, clear spells elsewhere with lows of 8 to 16 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Katie Dartford.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. This is Cross Question.
And it's Simon Marks in for Ian Dale this evening and all of this week, helming Cross Question here on LBC. We do this every evening at 8 o'clock, giving you the chance to surface whatever is on your mind and pose questions to our invited guests. On the panel tonight, I am delighted to welcome Alex Ballinger, Labour MP for Hales-Owen, a former Royal Marine and current member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Sir John Hayes, Conservative MP for South Holland and the Deepings since 1997, a former Security Minister and Transport Minister. He led the Conservatives' Common Sense Group, which opposed the so-called woke agenda. Ellie Chowns, Green Party MP for North Herefordshire, was elected to Parliament in 2024. She's a former Green MEP and ran for the party's co-leadership alongside MP Adrian Ramsey before being beaten by Zach Polanski. And Alexander Downer, Australia's longest-serving foreign minister from 1996 to 2007 under Conservative Prime Minister John Howard. He also briefly led the country's centre-right Liberal Party and later served as Australia's High Commissioner to the UK. Tonight they are all here to answer whatever question is top of mind for you this evening, whether it's the social media ban for the under-16s, the ongoing questions about where the UK is going to find the money to pay for stronger defence, the proposed ceasefire extension agreement between the US and Iran, the Court of Appeal upholding as lawful the government's ban of Palestine action, or anything else that you have been thinking about and mulling over all day. Call us now, because on Cross Question, it's your question that leads our conversation. You'll be very welcome whether you're listening to us on the radio or watching us in full high definition on Global Player, the LBC app, or the official LBC channel on YouTube.
0345 60 60 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
And questions tonight already piling in. Good evening to everybody on the panel. Our first question is going to come this evening from Io, who is calling in tonight from Romford. Good evening to you, Io.
Good evening, panel. Right, my question is, I think that this media ban is absolutely fantastic. I have 3 children, 12, 8 and 6, and I think this is a great idea. And I want to know on the panel the people who disagree with me and why.
Well, Alex Ballinger, I'm going to confidently predict, agrees with you and thinks it's a great idea.
That's quite right, Simon. I do think it's an excellent idea. I mean, there's loads of evidence that social media is harmful for kids. It's really addictive. There's lots of really inappropriate content on there for children. So I'm glad that the government is taking measures to ban it. And we can learn lessons from the Australians on how it's been done. But it's important that we put our children's safety first.
Keen to hear from the Australians in a moment. But Sir John Hayes?
I've long called for this. I'd also want to see smartphones taken out of schools. I've called for that in the House and elsewhere. Interesting. Let's take a step back. When the internet first emerged as a huge change in our country 25, 30 years ago, I knew that it would have all kinds of ramifications which would be unhealthy, unhappy, and indeed that's what's occurred. Curiously, you are regulated as a broadcast media. Print media is regulated.
Absolutely.
Publishing a book is a regulated affair, and yet we let the internet let rip. Extraordinary. The Parliament took 25 years. The last Conservative government that introduced the Online Harm Bill. This takes that further, rightly so, and it may not end here.
You don't think, but why not take it further?
I would take it further.
Where would you take it?
So I would have a similar system of regulation for the internet that applies to broadcast media, that applies to print media. I mean, why can people hide behind anonymity to say the most spiteful, awful, dishonest things? We're fudging the line between reality and fiction, truth and lies, and that's not acceptable.
Ellie Chowns.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Io. You know, we should be doing everything that we can to protect children. So I welcome the fact that government is taking action on this and that they did run a consultation. You know, it's really important that parents and children's voices are heard in this debate. I do feel that it's really important that we're regulating the companies, not regulating children's behaviours and not expecting parents to police it. You know, we've got these huge tech companies that are monetising children's attention, monetising all of our attention. And as Sir John says, actually, you know, being completely irresponsible as publishers of all sorts of stuff that absolutely shouldn't be on there. So I think we do need to make sure that the focus of the regulation is on the companies themselves. There's a lot of devil in the detail. I mean, some of that was acknowledged by Liz Kendall in her statement today. And so the government is saying, you know, they're making a statement today, we're banning it. And actually, they're going to make another statement in another month. And then they're going to get Ofcom to do some more work. And then there's legislation coming forward at the end of the year. So it's kind of a multi-stage process. But I think there is, you know, cross-party agreement that we've got to take action to protect kids. The thing is, though...
So let me just, if I can just push you on that. Based on what you know now, if this thing came up in Parliament for a vote tomorrow, the Greens would back the government?
Based on what I understand now about what they're proposing, I would back what they're proposing. But I do think we've got to, you know, talk and really address issues like this potential cliff edge for 16-year-olds. Like, for example, the fact that there are all sorts of other harmful things that are not at the moment having stuff done to address them. For example, you know, the ability to sort of infinitely scroll and stuff. I've been working on the representation of the people bill, trying to kind of get more clarity, you know, so that you've got to label deepfakes, for example. There's so much in the online space that we've got to address. I do think this is a step in the right direction. There are absolutely questions about, you know, people say, well, they did this in Australia, but lots of kids are still getting around it. We've really got to learn the lessons from that. But I also think, you know, let's not let the perfect be the enemy of something that is a bit better, while at the same time recognising that, you know, the online kids need to learn to use the online space. And actually, it's not like the harm stops at 16. There's so much of stuff that is actually harmful to adults. And so this is why we must make the companies take more responsibility.
Well, it would be magnificent on any evening to have Alexander Downer with us here in the studio, but particularly this evening. So everybody around the table thinks this is a great idea, may have some positive impact. Io, our caller from Romford, says he thinks it's fantastic news. Do you, from the Australian perspective, agree?
Well, first of all, Australians overwhelmingly support the ban we had in Australia since December last year. So there's no question of that, and all the same arguments have been canvassed in Australia. With all the same responses. Huge worry about the impact of social media on children during their formative years. So you can, it's worth spending a moment on this if I can. You can trace the impact of smartphones on the mental stability and health of children, of young people, from the introduction of smartphones like sort of 15 or so years ago. And you can see the deterioration. So there's clearly a corollary. And this is why in Australia it was decided, first of all, by my own state government in South Australia and then the federal government, the federal parliament, to institute this ban. Is it a cure-all? Believe me, it is not. It's a great idea. It's worth pursuing. It's worth the government here and the parliament here taking time, not rushing it too much and thinking about how better to make it work. Because in Australia, we've had it for whatever that is, six or 7 months, and still over 70% of under 16s are on social media platforms. So, it's a start. That's all you can say for it. It's a start. And I just want to make one other point. You know, parents have huge responsibility for their children, huge responsibility. And they shouldn't just say the parliament should take over the responsibility for the behaviour of our children. They have to invest time and energy in looking after and monitoring the behaviour of their own children.
But you accept that many of them are saying, we also need some government help.
Yeah, as
happened in Australia.
As has happened in Australia. Well, yes, but the parents shouldn't think that Parliament can fix this problem. Parliament should try to. And the Australian Parliament, state and federal, have tried to. And now the British Parliament is going to do the same thing. Great. But that is not the end of the story for parents.
Well, it is rare to have an issue come up on Cross Question where everybody around the table broadly agrees. But to get some disagreement into this conversation, let's go to our next caller, who is 10 years old. It's Anne, calling in with parental permission. Anne in Rayners Lane, thanks very much indeed for calling into Cross Question tonight. What is your question, Anne, for the panel?
So I'm currently 10 years old and I'm against the ban because I've been doing YouTube for quite a long time, like around 1 year, and then I'm only allowed like 10 minutes every day because my parents have a screen time limit, and sometimes people get out of control, but I have a screen time limit, so I don't get out of control. I play cricket and it doesn't really affect my brain, but there's one thing that we have to make sure that we don't do. We can't watch shorts because it can affect your brain a lot.
And you do not watch shorts. I mean, your parents have told you not to do that, and you agree to that. Is that right, Anne?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for asking the question. Let me turn to Alex Ballinger, the Labour Member of Parliament for Hales Owen, government supporter. What do you say to Anne, who says, I don't want a ban. I only spend 10 minutes a day on YouTube. I don't watch shorts. I'm all right.
What an excellent point, Anne. You've said that really well, and it's great that your parents are being so responsible. That's exactly the sort of thing that we should be encouraging. As I understand the ban in Australia, and of course we're still working through the details in the UK, it's that social media user-to-user connection, which is the bit that's banned. So if children want to watch YouTube, particularly the educational parts of YouTube, ours is still being worked out, but if it's like what's in Australia, that will still be permitted. It's the comments, it's the user contact, it's the strangers being able to talk to children in that comment section, which is the bit that we're more concerned about than children watching YouTube content.
Alexander Downer, in Australia, would Anne still be able to access YouTube?
Yes. Yes, she would. And I think her comments are very interesting because I have grandchildren in Australia, and she could be speaking for them.
Okay.
That is exactly what they say. And by the way, one of their arguments is if there is a total ban, we're not going to be able to communicate with each other, with our friends. And we want to communicate with our friends. So my grandson, who's 14 years old, he wants to communicate through, dare I mention it, Instagram with his friends at school when he's at home. And that's banned. But, I mean, he uses VPN, and so it's easy to get around.
Right. Well, I was seeing...
When you get to 14, by the way, you know much more than any of us around this table.
Well, exactly. I mean, I was seeing statistics today that says the majority of children in Australia who had social media accounts before the ban was enforced in December still have them. So, John, what's your answer to like Anne, who says she doesn't want a ban?
Anne sounds like a sensible child from a sensible family, because she said that the screen time is being restricted by her parents, I guess. And I say this, I've got a 5-year-old grandson, little boy Arthur, and we do all kinds of stuff. We play out in the garden, we kick a ball about, we read books, we write stories, we paint and draw. We do all the things I did as a little boy, long before this, because I'm old. I mean, perhaps not the oldest on the panel, I have no idea. But
way the oldest.
No, that's
Let's not go there. Let's not do that.
So look, childhood was ever a time of exploration and discovery, of exchanging information and finding out new things. But it can be in real time. It can be in the real world. It doesn't have to be by proxy. So I'm I'm extremely enthusiastic about this, but I accept it's a start, and I accept the enforcement is going to be a challenge.
Now, I have a corrective to all of us, because Anne is a boy, not a girl.
I didn't know.
Anne, sorry.
We apologise to you, Anne, for that. But Ellie Chowns, what's your message to him?
Yeah, Anne, I mean, you know, you're clearly an incredibly articulate person, and I'm just hugely full of admiration that you phoned up this programme and made your voice heard. And I actually made this point at the start. It's so important that parents and kids' voices are heard in this. I think what this conversation is kind of highlighting is two particular things. One is that if kids are using the internet with parental support and parental input and guidance and oversight, that's completely different from kids, well, actually from tech companies being let loose on kids in the privacy of their bedrooms and their pockets, and, you know, with absolutely no ability of anybody to have any idea over it. And I think it goes back to that point, Alexander, you know, you were talking about parents have a responsibility. But for me, the responsibility has to be laid on the tech companies that have been exploiting kids and indeed adults' attention and monetizing it and not taking responsibility for the stuff that they're publishing. So watching some educational content on YouTube with your parents in the room, fantastic. The sort of stuff of, you know, strangers being able to reach out to kids via platforms that are doing nothing to protect them, clearly that has got to be stopped.
Before we go to a break, I want to see if we can go back to Anne just to get a little bit of feedback on what he has heard so far. Anne, what did you make of the answers that the panel gave to your wonderful question?
So maybe we can delete the comment, we can, for under 16, maybe the comment section can be banned, but maybe under 16s are allowed to watch videos but not shorts, because they can still affect your brain, your shorts. So then you're allowed to like, but maybe you can't make your own channel.
Anne, I think we should get you involved in the government's consultation on all of this. I think Alex Ballinger should immediately connect you. Absolutely, come and do the panel. Thank you so much for calling in, and thanks to your dad for letting you participate in the programme. Have a great night. That was Anne in Rayners Lane. More of your questions to come here on Cross Question. You can ask about the social media ban or any other issue in the news that is on your mind. 0345 6060 973, text 84850. It is 20 minutes past 8.
LBC. With over 50 years' experience, at Fidelity, we know the difference between investing and being.
A former security minister, and our committee looked closely at Iran and published a report a couple of years ago about the threat it posed. And we should be very clear about this. Iran has been, for a considerable time, a monstrous force. In world affairs. It's had a devastating effect on its region and more widely. So let's be under no illusions about the Iranian tyranny. Okay. Having said that, in order to bring this conflict to an end, there's got to be a negotiated outcome. Now, because it's clear that America can't eliminate the Iranian regime. They may have assumed they could. In fact, I suspect that President Trump miscalculated. He assumed that a military intervention would either bring about regime change or obliterate the existing Iranian state. That's clearly not going to happen. So they're going to have to find some other way of solving this. What he says, the trouble with President Trump, and I would vote for him if I was in America, by the way, but the trouble with American Trump is he says things in the moment, doesn't he? maybe that's a product of the stuff we were talking about earlier. Maybe that's a product of the kind of politics that's stimulated by a kind of online dominated discourse. But he says these things and then he changes his mind very quickly. It's very hard to negotiate on that basis. But let's be clear who the good guys and who the bad guys here are. We have to recognise that Iran is a threat to the whole of the West, the whole of the world. And America is a very different proposition.
I feel like we could spend the rest of the programme exploring why you would therefore vote for him, but that's for another day. Alexander Downer, Kevin's question really, I think, is asking, how can this 60-day process actually yield any kind of peace? I mean, the Iranians themselves yesterday said that even this memorandum of understanding in no way indicates that the distrust of their enemies has evaporated.
No, of course not. I mean, ever since 1979 and the Iranian Revolution, they have been intensely hostile, not just to the United States, but of course, importantly in the region, to Israel. And they're committed to eliminating Israel as a Jewish state. So we have to understand where they're coming from. They're not going to trust the Americans, and the Americans, he's quite right to ask that question. The Americans are not going to trust them. So what will happen, what has happened, is that their military capacity, Iranians' military capacity, has not been eliminated, but has been substantially degraded. They don't have an air force anymore. They don't really have a navy to speak of anymore. And their missile capabilities are very limited. So their capacity to support their proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis has also been degraded. This is all good news for the Western alliance, for the Western world. The question is, what will now happen to the Iranian regime? Clearly, at the moment, they are very divided amongst themselves in the administration of Iran. I don't mean the public. The public hate the regime. But the regime has all the guns. And so there's not much the public can do about that. But the regime itself is very divided, and you can see that through the long process of these negotiations and their chopping and changing of their positions. So time will tell. We'll have to wait and see. I wouldn't have expected regime change to happen in 3 months. I think it's a process that will take years, but it might take 1 or 3 years. But let's be realistic about this. It's in all of our interests that one day that regime does change, and we should support the people of Iran.
Ellie Chance, there's another way of reading Kevin's conversation. He says, how can the Iranians ever trust President Trump? I mean, he might be asking, how can the Iranian people ever trust President Trump, those who oppose the regime, after he now appears to be more than content to say that there has been regime change that has already occurred, even though evidently there has not. And he's more than happy to negotiate with the regime in order to let the oil flow, as he said last night on social media.
Yeah, I mean, what is one of the deeply depressing things about this entire episode, that I am worried that things are worse, much worse for the Iranian people now, the people who have so bravely struggled for literally decades to try to overthrow from within this incredibly repressive regime. We saw, thousands of them being killed on the streets in January. We've seen uprisings over years, the Women Life Freedom movement, fantastic bravery showed by citizens of Iran themselves trying to change the situation. And now, you've got an Iranian regime that's basically emboldened and further empowered by this stupid action on the part of President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, launching at the end of February a war of choice. Total act of aggression with no justification, absolutely no clear war aims. Clearly, total strategic failure wasn't in the least bit strategic from the beginning. And so, yeah, I feel really angry on behalf of the people of Iran, clearly. And, we are now back basically trying to negotiate into a position that was where the world was in relation to Iran 10 years ago, where there was a process negotiating towards gradual moving to controlling the nuclear threat and so forth. It was President Trump that ripped that up first time around. The man has clearly made the world a much more dangerous place, had all sorts of knock-on effects for the globe more generally in terms of, making us more insecure, starting a conflagration in the region as a whole, huge effects on the economy, which have had knock-on impacts on people in this country. Utter irresponsibility and, frankly, idiocy on the part of President Trump, totally indefensible. And in terms of rebuilding trust, no conflict ever ends without the rebuilding of trust between partners who were previously utterly divided. So there has got to be a process to do that. I welcome the announcement today. Do I have any faith myself that it'll last any length of time or even until the weekend? You have to hope. Do you trust? That's very hard.
Alex Ballinger.
I agree with Ellie. It was a catastrophic mistake by Trump and Netanyahu to engage in this war. If you judge them by the goals that they had at the start of the war, regime change, reducing ballistic missiles, nuclear stockpiles, banning Iran from ever having a nuclear weapon and maintaining the Strait of Hormuz open. At different times, there were different targets.
Yeah,
but that
10
seems
different
to be the
ones
main
in a week, wasn't it?
It changed a lot, but none of those things have been achieved. I think it's great we have a negotiation now. We can move to a better position than we are at the moment, but of course we would have been in a much better situation if we went to negotiations 3 or 4 months ago rather than starting this awful mess that's turned not just the region but consumers in the UK paying higher petrol prices, electricity prices, and the whole of Europe's economy struggling.
Your Prime Minister has never publicly called it a catastrophic mistake. Is that what he's saying privately? Is that phrase being used privately within the halls of government?
So I'm very happy to use that phrase. You will hear, I'm on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, you will hear people like Emily Thornberry use that phrase. As the Prime Minister, you have to maintain a good relationship with Donald Trump, the president of our largest and most important ally. So I can understand why he would be more diplomatic. But I think anyone that's looked at this conflict, anyone with any sort of understanding of the Middle East can understand that it was a big misstep. And I'm sure that the Prime Minister behind the scenes thinks exactly the same.
Well, my colleagues are right about not having a clear war aim. All conflicts should be predicated on the basis of what are you trying to achieve. And that was never really clear. I think I've said before, and I repeat, that I think America miscalculated. I think they estimated that the effect of their military action would be fast.
He thought it was going to be Venezuela all over again.
Yeah, exactly. However, Iran is certainly in a weaker place than it was when this began.
Is it?
So yeah, absolutely.
It knows it can hold America to ransom.
Militarily, they are significantly degraded.
But they can hold the global economy to ransom anytime they like by shutting the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, but let's be clear, they're militarily hugely degraded, and the chances of the regime in its current form perpetuating has certainly been dramatically reduced.
You compare it to the situation with the Ayatollah in his 80s before the conflict started. I know the Americans have killed him, or the Israelis have killed him.
The supreme leader.
But he was due to die anyway. Would that not have been a better chance for regime change, that happening organically rather than that rally around the flag effect that you get when any country is invaded?
It's important to understand how Iran is governed. Okay, the supreme leader is just that, supreme. So when it's a pyramid, if you like. The very apex of the pyramid sits the supreme leader. Taking the supreme leader out and taking the next level of that pyramid out has undoubtedly weakened that tyranny. Now, I think it's very uncertain how long it will take for regime change to happen, because there's not a well-funded, well-organised opposition that can step into that void. And that's the great problem. Right?
Well, okay. I've got to use my position briefly at the top of this particular pyramid to say that we're going to come back to this conversation, because I'm sure there will be more on Iran, if not tonight, but later in the week on Cross Question. Lots more of your questions to come tonight to our terrific panel. Alex Ballinger, Labour MP for Hales Owen, Sir John Hayes, Conservative MP for South Holland and the Deepings, Ellie Chowns, Green Party MP for North Herefordshire, and Alexander Downer, Australia's longest-serving foreign minister. That's all ahead. It's now 27 minutes to 9, and the news headlines come from Katie Dartford.
Children under 16 are expected to be banned from using apps like Instagram, TikTok and Facebook from next spring. The Prime Minister insists the restrictions, similar to those introduced in Australia, will give youngsters their childhood back. Donald Trump says the Strait of Hormuz is already partially open to shipping. Speaking on the fringes of the G7 summit in France, the US president claims the key trade route will be fully restored on Friday, when a ceasefire deal that's been electronically agreed will be signed in person. And Spain have been held to a shock goalless draw by Cape Verde in their opening match of the World Cup. The European champions entered the tournament as one of the favourites to lift the trophy, but were frustrated by a side 65 places below them in the rankings. LBC weather, cloud increasing this evening with showery rain in the north and west at times, clear spells elsewhere with lows of 8 to 16 degrees.
This is LBC.
So let me get this straight. You pack the sleeping bags?
Yes.
Mosquito repellent?
Yes.
And flipping...
He asks our next question, which is, how does the panel feel about Elon Musk amassing $1 trillion in wealth? Well done, thanks capitalism, or an egregious abomination that should never have been allowed to happen? And Josh clarifies that $1 trillion is $1,000 billion. Counting to a million would take 11 days. Counting to a trillion would take 32,000 years. Well, we better not do that, given that we've only got 23 minutes of the programme left. Alexander Downer, how do you feel about Elon Musk amassing $1 trillion in wealth?
Well, he's obviously a brilliant businessman, which means he is creative, entrepreneurial, and provides the market, that is the public, with products that they would want to buy and are able to buy. I mean, in his case, it's a complex business, but satellites, for example, Starlink, internet, any range of different things he's invented and developed, and he's capitalized. So the alternative is that, it's the Soviet model. Just leave it to the government, and the government will do everything. I think the genius of the capitalist system is that some people are entrepreneurial and come up with ideas that sell, and they're able to capitalise on that. That's a good thing.
Ellie Chowns is itching to disagree with you.
Oh my goodness, where do I start? Honestly,
far left like the Soviet. They prefer the Soviet model.
Alexander, this is exactly the problem. This is where I started rolling my eyes. One of the places I was rolling my eyes when you were talking, because it's completely ridiculous to suggest that all you can have is capitalism, absolutely red in tooth and claw, exemplified by Elon Musk. And I completely agree with Josh. with Josh. It's an egregious abomination that one single man should have so much wealth when there are still hundreds of millions of people living in the world without enough to keep body and soul together. You know, that is a fundamental outrage. And it's ridiculous to claim that the alternative to that is Soviet control and that there's nothing in the middle. I mean, we have endless examples of countries all around the world that do something in the middle. It's called, you know, the managed market, or, you know, democratic socialism, or social democracy, or any variety of options that are in the middle.
And the richest country in the world is the United States, and per capita GDP in the United States is about 30-40% higher than in this country.
And Alexander, if I can finish my sentence,
is that they have entrepreneurs who come up with ideas which the market wants, that is, consumers want.
If I can finish my sentence, the government shapes the markets. I mean, I was literally just this afternoon listening to an event with Mariana Mazzucato, who writes at UCL in London. She writes exactly about this point, that so-called all of this innovation, you know, lots of the innovation actually that we take for granted now was funded by the American state through their investment in the space program, etc. You can't say that it's the market on one hand and the government on the other. It is the government's job to regulate the market. And one of the key things that the government should do is tax extreme wealth. It's sickening that there are some people who've got, you know, $1,000 billion dollars of worth, and there are people who cannot even put food on the table for their families. Something's gone really wrong in the system.
Can I just ask you, if Elon Musk were using that money beyond his commercial activities, if he were using that money for the public good, would you take a different view?
No. I think that we should tax wealth fairly. Now, there are some billionaires who put some of their money into things that we could broadly classify as the public good, global health and so forth. Right. But it would actually be far better to have a system in which all of the billionaires were subject to taxation, because in my view, a democratically controlled government will more reliably make the decisions about what the public good is. And the public good, you know, we are not here on the earth as humans to just amass money. We're here on the earth to build community, to look after each other, to create a better world for the next generation.
Where politicians and civil servants make all the decisions for you. That is a very depressing country.
Let me get to the other side of the table.
I don't have much confidence in politicians myself.
Let me get to Alex Ballinger.
Elon Musk, a man who has dripped poison through social media.
Than a bunch of politicians.
Let me get to Alex Ballinger, because we've got more politicians to get to on this side of the table.
Alex Ballinger. Any poison as a politician. It's an obscene amount of money. Of course it is. £1 trillion. It's like $150 for every person in the world, or something ridiculous. But, you know, he is an entrepreneur. He's earned a lot of money. If he's followed the rules in America and paid his taxes fairly in America according to those rules, I think that's fine. And I think if we start trying to tax people's wealth at the levels the Green Party is talking about, and we do that independently as the United Kingdom, all of the billionaires would leave and the country would be much, much poorer than it was.
Do you think all the billionaires would leave? You think all the billionaires would leave, or would you actually bring in enough of a tax base to pay for some defence?
Every example you've had of a wealth tax has been abandoned by the country because it hasn't worked properly.
That's
it's been shown to fail.
That's factually untrue.
I think what we need to do is regulate the market properly. We need to allow entrepreneurs to succeed, especially when we have tech moving so much and so quickly. We need to celebrate that success. But in Elon Musk's case, I have a much bigger, more serious problem with some of the things that he's doing with that money. Exactly. Now, that's an area that we need to be working on. That's an area we need to be regulating, not just the social media ban for under 16s. We need to go further than the Online Safety Act, which was great from the last government. But the sort of racism and bias and hateful conduct that he's promoting on his platform, that's the thing that I have the big problem with.
OK, so John Hayes.
OK, so let me take a step back from this fierce debate that's taking place on the panel and see if we can find a synthesis. Because I was a businessman, and I was in a small business that we helped grow to be a big business. In my constituency, there are lots and lots of businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and so on. They embody all of the enterprise, innovation, the business of creating a product which the market wants in the locality. And the backbone of our economy is made up of just those kind of businesses. Okay, but that's a world apart from the globalist corporate companies which actually snuff out enterprise because they don't actually want to compete with those kind of businesses I've described. So I look for an economy where the economic order sustains the social order, because the businesses I've described in my constituency reinvest in the locality. They live where they work. They employ local people. They're not sort of distant, immensely wealthy, internationalist, globalist corporates. They're businesses in touch with the people who supply them and the people they supply. So that's the kind of economy I want to build. I want to build an economy based around protecting those businesses from the kind of avaricious, unfair practice of those globalists. But looking at least two members of the panels, I imagine that two members of the panel were enthusiasts for globalism, were enthusiasts for the internationalism, which has deprived Britain of so many of our manufacturing capability, for example, which means we import so much of the food we consume, which could be grown locally. I want a more measured, more gentle, more harmonious economic order that reinforces a strong civil society. I mean, is that too much to ask? Is that too much to ask?
So, John, you're basically making the point that the government's role...
I don't understand the economics of it. I mean, if you want to generate economic growth and prosperity, you need to engage with the rest of the world, and you need companies to invest and be able to make profits. Where I do agree with you is that you need to have competitive markets.
Absolutely.
You want to guard against monopolies and oligopolies. And by the way, I hate to say this to you, to the Greens and the Labour Party, but government monopolies are as pernicious and damaging for the economy as private monopolies.
Let me give Ellie the final word on this topic.
That's just the sort of lazy generalisation that leads us into problems, right? Let us look at, for example, water supply. We have a huge support in this country for public ownership of water, because in that part of the economy, privatisation has been a total disaster.
No, you're talking about competitive markets.
Exactly.
Do you have a competitive market for water?
Precisely.
Presumably you don't, actually, because it would be very hard to have separate water companies competing within the one locality.
And my point is exactly that.
So it's a monopoly.
But market ideology said that we must privatise everything because competition is good.
Yeah,
now, Sir John, you made an important point about the importance of entrepreneurialism at all levels, the importance of small and medium-sized businesses. And this is exactly my point. The job of government is to regulate the market. And part of that regulation should obviously be taxing extreme, obscene wealth and redistributing so that everybody can have a decent life.
One quick response, because my job is to regulate and we've got to go to a break.
So this is the key point, okay? Government needs to know when to step forward and when to step back, when others can do better. And the model I described shortens supply lines and creates national economic resilience at a time of global uncertainty.
And the question we were asked was about Elon Musk. So surely it's obvious government should step into that.
We've travelled a long way, and we're going to travel further, because we're going to continue to take your questions on Cross Question to our panel all the way up until 9 o'clock tonight. The time now is 12 minutes to 9 on LBC.
This is LBC.
Squishmallow squad get us underway. Oh, strong header from Maui. Straight to Boyle on the wing. Here comes Gordon. It's a goal!
Both illegal and illegal migration got completely out of control under the last government. We had more than 1 million people coming in a single year under Boris. They set up the asylum hotel system. We had 400 hotels set up around the country in the middle of town centres, which were completely inappropriate. And illegal migration, small boat crossings, got up to very high levels. The measures that Shabana Mahmood has put into place are making a real difference to all of those things. And we've closed more than half of the hotels, down to 180, I think, the last time I checked. Illegal migration across the channel in small boats is down. If your statistics say 13%, I'll take that as the latest ones, but it's the lowest in 4 years from what I've seen. And legal migration is down to manageable levels. So people are still coming in to work, but we don't have the unsustainable burden on our public services that we had under the last government. So I think Shabana deserves real credit for, in just 2 years, getting a grip on this, getting things under control and showing some real results.
Alexander Downer, you, as I understand it, advised the last government on the Rwanda scheme. So you come at this from an interesting perspective. Is Shabana Mahmood doing a good job?
My sense is she is doing a good job. That is my sense. And I'm sort of a bit with Alex here. I think the record of previous Home Secretaries, not to be party political in a foreign country, that's not my job, is a bit patchy, let's be honest. I mean, some of these statistics on immigration were immediately post-COVID, so there'd be no immigration during COVID, and when COVID ended, there was an upsurge in particular of students coming and so on. But nevertheless, it looked pretty out of control to me, the immigration system here, and I have a sense that it is not back in control, but it is getting back into control. And one of the keys here, if you don't run offshore processing, and that's proved to be very successful for Australia in stopping illegal immigration, but if you're not going to do that, the UK needs to have a very strong collaborative arrangement with the French. And the impression I get is that the relationship with the French is gradually improving.
It does seem to be getting better after Brexit, doesn't it? It's about the personal relationship, I think, between governments as well as the policy relationship. And I think us resetting that European connection, the other work we're doing to build connections with the EU is also paying dividends on migration and our relationship with
Well, and worth making the point that the Prime Minister is in France tonight with Emmanuel Macron, the other G7 leaders. So, John Hayes, is Shabana Mahmood doing a good job? Is she showing...
I like Shabana Mahmood, by the way, personally, and I think she gets immigration in a way that many people on the left don't, and that's why she's got so many critics in her own party and more widely. And it's true that we've had too much immigration in this country for far too long, both legal and illegal. You can't have your borders breached with impunity and call yourself a nation. You define a nation by the fact that the people who live here are entitled to be here. And I met Alexander when we were in government, and he came and briefed the Common Sense Group on exactly this issue. Australia had a thing called Operation Sovereign Borders, and part of that was dealing with the problem at source, where the people traffickers operate. Part of it was offshore processing. Part of it was the legislative framework necessary to repel that kind of illegal immigration. But let's just talk about illegal immigration, if I might, for a second. The assumption was made in this country that legal migration fueled growth, and any growth was good growth. What matters is per capita growth. And what we did by importing very large numbers of people, we weakened our economy because we made it dependent on cheap labour. And that's incredibly unhealthy for an economy, because, of course, people come with an economic value and an economic cost. They may bring value if they're highly skilled, but they also need roads. They need hospitals. They need schools. They need dentists. They need housing. So they come with an economic cost. We imported far too many people to this country whose cost was much greater than their economic value. That happened under successive governments. It began largely with Blair. Up until 1997, immigration and emigration were more or less in balance for a considerable time. It exploded when we had this awful free movement with the European Union, appalling policy.
It went up after Brexit, though.
And it got no better later. And I think all the governments since 1997 have a part to play in that. And I'd go further than the current Home Secretary, but I agree that she does seem to get it in a way that many haven't.
Let me get to Ellie Chant.
Yeah, I'm really worried by the way that conversations about immigration so often descend into, generalisations and a lack of looking at the evidence. Sir John has just said we've had lots of people coming in and they've cost much more than they've given this country. That is not actually what the evidence shows.
It is what the evidence shows.
It actually is not. It depends on what sort of immigration, but most of the people who've come in recent years
I just won't have that. That's just not true.
Okay,
Sir John,
but I want to get back to Martin's question.
I want to respond to the question.
The question is Shabana Mahmood doing a good job?
No, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Because she is part of the hostile environment that suggests that the problems of this country are due to immigration, and that is a complete distraction. The problems of this country are due to inequality, they're due to many, many years of austerity, they're due to government failure for donkey's years under the Conservatives, they're due to, sadly,
Would you accept the numbers that have been continuing under the last government? There are 1 million people a year coming into the country, that hundreds of thousands, say, coming in on small boats. Do you think that's good for the UK?
So again, this is why we need to be really clear about it. There was 1 year where about 1 million people came in, and of those, approximately 300,000 were students who were paying through the nose to study in our universities and are going to go home afterwards. Approximately 200,000, something like that. Let me just finish, though. Approximately 200,000 of those were Ukrainian refugees who we absolutely welcomed with open arms, as we should have done. I spent this morning with the chairman of the Ukrainian parliament talking about exactly these issues, the generosity showed by our country. So we need to be really, really clear. And then another few 100,000 were people who were coming into work in, for example, social care.
Yeah.
We desperately need
let's
to
talk
invest.
about social care. Let me make this point, because there's been a deception in what you said. You challenged my point about cost and value. Let's talk about the care scheme. More dependents came than care workers. What does that tell you about cost and value?
But that doesn't mean that they're a net drain on the public purse, because those care workers, and I've met a number of them, those care workers are doing really important, and the dependents will be children who are going to school and will grow up to contribute and be active members.
There is a time when that's a good thing. We should be compassionate. We should be supporting Ukrainians and other refugees, but it needs to be managed. It needs to be at the appropriate number. It needs to be something the country can control.
Reform and Restore UK will get stronger and stronger. And the sort of argument that you're hearing from Ellie plays absolutely into the hands of those political parties. That is what drives them, and what has driven them more than any other factor over the last few years has been the mismanagement of immigration in this country.
The liberal bourgeoisie's failure to accept that, and failure to reflect the views the vast majority of hard-working, patriotic, law-abiding, decent British people.
Let's wrap this conversation up with Ellie.
I believe British people are by nature generous, open, tolerant. They recognise that we have a humanitarian obligation to offer asylum to people who are fleeing violence. I also believe the British people recognise that some people come here to work and make a huge contribution to our society. For example, working in social care. Both of these systems need to be managed. For people who are seeking asylum, we need more safe routes, like we did for the Ukrainians. Then you wouldn't have people dying in small boats in the Channel. Nobody wants that. And for work, you need a system where we recognise where we need people to support our society and contribute to our society, and allocate visas accordingly. It's about legal, managed systems, and that, not the scapegoating and demonising of anybody who migrates here.
What we need is British jobs for British workers, as Gordon Brown once said.
OK, well, what we need to do is also wrap our conversation up, because we are approaching the end of tonight's edition of Cross Question, which means that we end with the fun question of the night, which comes from Kat in Dormansland, who asks, police in a small Italian town have finally found a moped that was stolen way back in 1984. The owner was gifted it for his 16th birthday and was very happy to be reunited with it again 42 years later. What item of your past did you lose that you would adore to have back in your life? Alexander Downer.
Well, It's a very hard question to answer. But when I was about 7 years old, I was staying in a hotel in Austria, and someone broke into my room and stole my shorts. And I would like to get those shorts back one day. Or I wouldn't fit into them anymore, but as a memento. I mean, when you're 7 and they steal your shorts, that's pretty bad.
Unforgettable. So, John.
So I have this dream that when you get to heaven, you go into a room once you're met by St. Peter, and you go into this room and you first of all see all the things on trestle tables you've lost in your life, the keys, the umbrellas, the scarves, the gloves, and then you go into the next room and you see the other things you lost. Your hope, your innocence, your virtue. And that you then regain all of those in heavenly bliss. That's what I long for.
What a great answer,
Alex.
When I was elected a couple of years ago, not as long as John here, I took a judgment that my constituents really hated motorbikes because of the noise they had up and down the street. I'm a secret motorbiker. I have this fantastic Africa Twin, and I'm looking forward to standing down as an MP and being able to ride it again.
Ellie Chowds.
Well, the mention of this story from Italy made me think, actually, I had a necklace, a sort of carved wooden necklace from a monastery in Italy that my best friend bought me on her honeymoon, and I've lost it. This was years and years ago, so I would really love to find that
I'm
again.
going to relate to Ellie, because in my case, it would be my mother's engagement ring, which disappeared while she was in hospital. And almost certainly not the hospital's fault. She was suffering from dementia, and the ring should never have gone to the hospital, but it did, never to be seen again, which is a great shame. My thanks to all of our panellists tonight. Sir John Hayes, Conservative MP for South Holland and the Deepings, Alex Bollinger, Labour MP for Hales Owen, Ellie Chowns, Green Party MP for North Herefordshire, and Alexander Downer, very welcome here tonight, as the former Australian Foreign Minister. Tomorrow night, our panel will include the Liberal Dems health spokesperson Helen Morgan, Labour MP Natasha Irons, and former Tory Minister Paul Scully, plus a mystery guest that we are still trying to identify. That's Cross Question coming up tomorrow night at the same time, 8 o'clock, and every night this week, Monday through Thursday, here on LBC. When we come back in our next hour, we're going to go back to our conversation about social media, because there were so many of you that wanted to get in on that conversation at 7 that we think we should give it another whirl. And we'll do that coming up after the 9 o'clock news.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, the UK's become part of a growing global movement to tighten online safety for children. The Prime Minister's announced a social media ban for under-16s due to take effect from next spring. Esther Jai, the mother of murdered teenager Brianna Jai, has told LBC there are so many harms on social media.
The main reason why I campaign is because of the suffering that Brianna experienced the 2 years running up to her death. So she was completely addicted to social media. She had an eating disorder, she was self-harming, and all of this was being exacerbated by the harms that she was seeing online.
And you can put your questions on the ban to the Tech Secretary Liz Kendall in Call the Cabinet tomorrow morning with Nick Ferrari here on LBC. Donald Trump says the Strait of Hormuz is already partially open to shipping. The US president claims the key trade route will be fully restored on Friday when the framework for peace with Iran is signed. The deal has been designed to include Lebanon, but Israel says it will continue to station forces in the country. Former US Defense Secretary and CIA Chief Leon Panetta has told LBC it's all very tenuous.
We've virtually given Iran total control of the Straits of Hormuz, which gives them a tremendous amount of leverage and a tremendous influence in the Middle East for the future. Israel is not part of this agreement. They've made that clear. And if they're not part of this agreement, I'm not sure you can hold a ceasefire together.
The Court of Appeal has ruled the government acted lawfully when it banned the protest group Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation. Almost 120 arrests have been made in London following today's decision of people suspected of showing support for the group. Cape Verde has produced one of the biggest shocks of recent times at the World Cup by holding one of the favourites, Spain, to a goalless draw in Atlanta. Egypt lead Belgium 1-0 going into the second half of their game in Seattle. Saudi Arabia play Uruguay from 11 before Iran go up against New Zealand in the early hours of tomorrow morning. They'll become the first team in World Cup history to compete in a country with which they're at war. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 35 points at 10,435. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.16. LBC weather, cloud increasing this evening with showery rain in the north and west at times, clear spells elsewhere with lows of 8 to 16 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Katie Dartford.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Simon Marks.
And I'm in for Ian Dale with you every night this week until Thursday. Rachel Johnson, of course, here as usual on Friday, and then I'm back again next week as well. There is some breaking news coming out of the United States this evening via the New York Times, which is reporting that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is distancing himself from the US-Iran agreement, calling it his decision. Netanyahu said he had voiced his opinion in multiple conversations with Trump, but did not say precisely where they had disagreed. In any agreement between Iran and the United States, Prime Minister Netanyahu said Israel will seek to preserve its freedom of action against emergent threats. He said Israel did so today, killing 4 people that he said had posed a threat to Israeli soldiers in Lebanon. And asked whether the same principle would apply to Iran, he said that he was committed to ensuring the country never posed a nuclear threat to Israel, so did not elaborate. So this, of course, raises big questions about what exactly is going on with this memorandum of understanding. I mean, this 5-day period that we're in now between the US and Iran saying that they had settled the wording in this memorandum of understanding, but they wouldn't sign it until Friday, was always going to be delicate, and there were always going to be questions about whether Israel was going to indicate that it was on board with this agreement or not. But the Israeli Prime Minister tonight appearing to distance himself from the US-Iran agreement, which is going to throw, I think, considerable attention on how Iran responds to that. And indeed how President Trump at the G7 in Evian tonight in France, hoping to take a victory lap for this ceasefire extension agreement, is going to react, and whether he's going to get on the phone with Benjamin Netanyahu yet again and urge him to come on board with the agreement. So we will keep a close eye on that. In this hour of the programme, we want to come back to our conversation about the Prime Minister's proposed social media ban for the under-16s, because so many of you wanted to get in on that conversation in our first hour together tonight. So we want to give everybody more of an opportunity to express their views about this social media ban. I know from the number of messages that we've received that there is real division of opinion over what the Prime Minister has announced, with many people endorsing the views of those people, including Elon Musk, who argue that this is censorship. Elon Musk today describing it as censorship law, a wolf in sheep's clothing. The real goal is to enable the UK government to track everyone. Other callers and texters to the programme backing the social media ban, many of them parents calling in to the programme. We even heard from a 10-year-old boy earlier on the programme saying that his family had managed to navigate use of social media within their family, but other families indicating on the programme tonight that they want government action to help them parent. Let me know what your view is of this this social media ban. You can call us at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. It is the same number for WhatsApp that it is for the phones. Earlier tonight on the programme, we heard from former Conservative Education Minister Lord Nash, whose amendment to this would force the government to raise the minimum age for children accessing social media platforms to 16 within 12 months. Lord Nash in the Lords, from the Conservative benches, has been steering this social media ban through the chamber, which is one reason why Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative Party leader and leader of the opposition, today indicated that she believes that her party deserves some credit for the announcement that the Prime Minister made today. Let's take a listen to what Lord Nash said on this programme shortly after 7 o'clock tonight.
But they've got to get the regulations right. They've got to get Ofcom organised to do it properly. I think we should take the win. I think we're pleased with the outcome, and I think the government have done a good job. They've listened to the consultation, and they've actually gone further than my amendment would have proposed.
But we also heard on the programme from political commentator and head of communications for the Popular Conservatism campaign group, Annunziata Rees-Mogg, who had this to say about the government's plan.
Some of the content is pernicious. Yes, absolutely. And it is parents' jobs to make sure they teach their children how to keep themselves safe. And that is our role. It is our responsibility. And it is to teach them to be responsible adults themselves, not to be nannied by an overarching state that then does want all adults to provide ID that they are over 16 or 18 for the different bans being proposed.
Parents, she said, ought to parent. She also reflected that viewpoint that Elon Musk has articulated on X over the last few hours, that this is the thin end of a very thick wedge that will see the government, any government, a government in the future perhaps, ultimately capable of tracking British people who engage in providing information to prove their age and identity in order to continue using social media. You can join this conversation at 0345 6060 973. You can text us at 84850. Jane is on the line from Bishop Stortford this evening. Jane, good evening. What would you like to say?
Good evening. Can you hear me all right?
I can, very well indeed.
Brilliant. This whole question of the right and the wrong, the philosophical underpinning of the necessity to understand what is right and what is wrong. And your earlier point, why does it only stop at the age of 16? Because we understand the nature of this anthropomorphic, agent-centered AI and how it's manipulating all age groups and adversely impacting our society. And, if I draw our attention back to the nature of law and society, we use regulation for very many things to avoid any kind of catastrophic nature on humanity. Pick any example in any dimension. We've been doing that since at least 250 years, and we've been doing it successfully. To a very great extent, right now, the Prime Minister understands the impact, the adverse impact. And why are we getting this person, Rees-Mogg, who says leave it to the autonomy of the people? Well, does she recognise that the autonomy of people is being robbed before them, and people do not possess this inherent understanding because they're not the oligarchs, they're not the constructor.
Well, Jane, in the case of Annunziata Rees-Mogg, I mean, part of her argument was parents can do this. Parents should do this, and we've certainly had callers who argue that, for example, iPhones and many devices already contain software features that allow parents more control over their children's use of social media than perhaps they are engaged in embracing. So why she was asking, should government have to step in? I think she was essentially suggesting that parents need to play the lead here.
Well, that does not stop parents taking the lead, as it never has done. Pick any example. The seatbelt scenario in vehicles. For example, that we understand that we must have seatbelts all around any person that's sitting in a vehicle, because should a crash occur, we need to minimize the detriment to humankind. Why is it the case that Rees-Mogg does not comprehend this simple criteria being used in AI, such that the AI has the capability of the anthropomorphic, agent-centered nature of it to disguise any given scenario? Be it politics, be it children, be it adults, in any given scenario, it is manipulating the autonomy of humankind.
But Jane, I understand the seatbelt comparison, but only in one regard. I mean, if we'd been holding this programme the day that the government announced the seatbelt ban, lots of people would have called in and said, I'll decide if I need to wear a seatbelt or not. It's my choice. I've got the right to do that. But there was a difference with the seatbelt ban. Of course, some people, even today, still don't wear seatbelts. But in order to wear a seatbelt, you didn't, or to prove that you were in compliance with the law, other than, as they put it at the time, clunk clicking, you didn't need to hand your own data over to the government, which is what many of our listeners object to about this. They argue that in order for you, over the age of 16, to prove that you are over the age of 16, you may end up in a situation where you have to do that in order to continue using social media.
And that point about transgressional AI, anthropomorphic agent-centric systems simulating an understanding but lack of transcendental consciousness, they rely on predictive processing, treating human cognition as predictable stimuli to directed influence on cognitive behavior. That procedural nature of AI robs and simplifies the binary criteria of yes and no, simplifies binary imitation of reality. And we know as humans, it is never binary. As humans, we have a degree and a classification. And why are we reducing humans as a means to an end, which is what AI does? Whereas we know, given the philosophical underpinning of the foundations of metaphysics of morals.
Okay, I think Jane, you might be getting a little bit too transcendental, even for me. But I think we got the gist of what you were trying to say there. You were arguing that the regulations should be applied much more broadly beyond people who are just the age of 16. We're going to take more of your calls and messages on this. Plus, coming up in a moment, we'll hear from this man.
Welcome to Scrap Heap Challenge, where mighty metal monsters are majestically manufactured from mountains of scrap.
That is Robert Llewellyn, legendary host of Scrap Heap Challenge. He's now an expert in electric cars, and we're going to ask him if the government is watering down their electric car plans. The time is coming up to 19 minutes past 9.
This is LBC.
Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And come on in to Classic FM Calm, LBC's soothing sister station. Find peace in the music with Classic FM Calm. Listen on Global Player or ask your smart speaker to play Classic FM Calm.
Giffgaff believe it's only fair you can get unlimited data for only £14 a month, which is great for Em, who's been
drinks that you can buy, fizzy drinks that you can buy in fast food restaurants and other food food emporia in New York City, and New Yorkers went nuts about it. We will come back to your calls and texts about this proposed social media ban for the under-16s, but I want to shift gears slightly. The Financial Times reported today a modest but I think important shift in the government's plans to end the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030. But he's planning to make a change that will mean by the end of the decade, as many as 50% of new cars sold can still be hybrids running on a mix of fossil fuels and electricity. Of course, that is up from 20% that was previously anticipated. Trade unions and industry leaders together urged the shift, with car manufacturers warning the original targets were going to be missed and jobs would be at risk. Is this a hint that the government's broader commitment to Energy Secretary Ed Miliband's net zero goals are in any way about to come under assault? Joining me now to talk about this is Robert Llewellyn, founder of the Everything Electric show, the world's #1 electric vehicle channel, which is on YouTube, I believe, Robert, and on other platforms as well, no doubt. Thanks very much indeed for being on the programme tonight. What do you make of this? It's not announced yet, but the Financial Times announcing that it's coming. What do you make of this dilution of the government's previously announced targets to phase diesel and petrol-powered cars out entirely by the end of the decade? Good evening to you.
Good evening. Yes, I mean, I'm not the least bit surprised. The lobbying, the arguments, have been going on for a long time. So the government is under enormous pressure from the remaining car manufacturers in the UK, the vast majority of whom are high-end luxury car makers. I mean, which is nothing to be ashamed of. We should be very proud of it. But Aston Martin, Bentley, McLaren, Rolls-Royce, those companies all make cars that cost around the price of a house. They don't make cheap cars, and they have no intention of ever stopping making cars with enormous petrol engines. So they'll be lobbying constantly, and they employ a lot of people, and that's not, I'm not denigrating them at all. That's what they do. There are other companies that make cars in this country, Toyota, constantly fighting, and have done all over the world with venomous fury, to never allow electric cars to be made, unless you're in China, where they make hundreds of thousands of electric cars and sell them. I've been in them in Shanghai. They're perfectly good cars. Nissan are making electric cars, have made a huge commitment to that, employ an enormous amount of people, make batteries in this country. The only battery factory we have is with Nissan. There is an element that I can't help thinking that the car companies, JLR, another one who are making electric cars and have committed to it, but they've spent a lot of time arguing and fighting and lobbying against this sort of legislation when they could have been developing new model electric cars. Ferrari now make an electric car, so it's really, we've turned a point, there's been a sort of pivot in the last 6 months, I'd say, that electric cars around the world have just been kind of accepted. They work, they're better than combustion cars, they last longer, they're cheaper to run, they give us energy independence. We don't have to import fuel from dodgy places, or, the fuel supply is very insecure. That's what we've learned.
So why do you think the government's proposing to do this? I mean, I saw statistics today that showed that in the first 5 months of this year, nearly 25% of new cars sold were EVs, which sounds like that's tremendous progress in terms of the transition towards EVs. But that is, of course, lower than where the government wanted things to be by now. So why water this down?
I mean, I can't get upset about it somehow, and I think I'm probably wrong, and I'm sure there'd be people who'll get very cross with me, but I don't think the target only really affects the manufacturers in this country. It's not going to affect the cars that we're importing, because they're all electric anyway. And of course, the majority of those are coming from China, which I think is a huge challenge to the automotive industry in the whole of Europe. And the same thing is happening in Germany. The big German manufacturers we all know of are fighting against any of this sort of legislation. And they're hanging on to what is increasingly becoming a kind of dated technology. It's been outmaneuvered by electric vehicles. And I mean, all the anxieties that people have had about them, and that's actually used in the article in the Financial Times, that people are worried about range anxiety. No, they're not. Nobody's worried about range anxiety. That's a very dated notion. And it's an easy little thing to throw out. Oh, people are worried about range anxiety and there's no charging infrastructure. 670,000 electric charge points in the UK. You cannot run out of electricity in the UK.
So left to the free market, regardless of what the government does with these various
I think
targets.
it's going to happen anyway, yes.
Where do you think we'll be by 2030?
We probably won't be that much further on, but I would dare say that we'll be in the sort of 4 to 5 million electric cars on the road, which will equate to about a quarter of all cars. And that, once we get to that point, then you're going to start seeing garages close, petrol stations, because they're not selling any petrol, or converting to electric car charging stations. You're going to see the big change, really, which is coming this year and later this year, and then it'll really expand next year, is if you can park a car outside your house, so if you can park a car off the street, which is about 60% of UK households, you'll use the car as a battery. So you'll charge it at night when electricity is cheap. You can run your house off it in the daytime when electricity is expensive. The whole way the grid operates will be affected by that. And we will stop importing quite as much fossil fuel. It's £1.4 billion a week leaves our economy to pay for fossil fuel. Obviously, it benefits our economy as well, but that money is going out of our economy. We could charge our cars and employ people to produce electricity in this country.
Can I put to you what one of our listeners has just texted in? Andy has texted in to say, I work for a UK car manufacturer and we are in trouble without this mandate. We have just voted in a reduction in hours. The UK is an awful place to build cars. The energy input per car in the UK is £250 per car compared to £50 in other plants. And the EV cars will not be made here. He says our electric model was sent to China and it was 30% of our work.
Yeah. I genuinely feel sorry for people who work in the automotive industry in this country. I mean, I think we can honestly say that it's been in decline for far longer than electric vehicles have been around. And we've been shipping our manufacturing offshore without a second thought. And the people who are doing that are not the workers who work in the factory. It's the bosses and the owners who are extraordinarily wealthy and now wealthier from doing that. So there is an element of, I think we have to remember why we buy cars in China, because they make them in China, because we encourage them to do it. We did have a manufacturing base here and we've kind of got rid of it. The energy costs in this country are very much down to us importing gas, and that cost has spiked, and our wholesale electricity price is governed by the price of gas, which is an absolute obscenity, and we have to change that very quickly. If it was governed by the price of offshore wind, we would have some of the cheapest electricity in the UK, in Europe. And look at what's happened in Spain, where there are new car factories being built because their energy is so cheap, and they use solar and wind is the vast majority of their electricity, and their wholesale electricity price is governed by that, not by imported gas. So we have some really serious problems we have to overcome that are nothing to do with electric cars or anything else. To maintain a manufacturing base in this country, we have to change the way our energy system works.
And Robert, I've got to ask you before you go, you mentioned the Ferrari, the electric Ferrari.
Yeah.
I've never seen such a fuss, a furious fuss being made about a car. By the way, a car that's going to cost €500,000.
Yes.
But the purists, maybe we've got some Ferrari purists listening to the programme, were outraged by this thing.
Yeah. It is odd, isn't it? I mean, I saw it. I was at the launch in Rome. It was a great privilege to be there. It's an extraordinary piece of engineering, really, genuinely phenomenal. I mean, they haven't been lazy. They've really pushed the boat out with it. It's an absolutely fascinating car. I've not driven it. I've sat in one. The interior is what you would expect in a car that costs £500,000, effectively. I mean, it is an amazing car.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't know what you do expect for a car that costs £500,000. What do you get for £500,000?
It smelt wealthy. That's all I can say. And the way the buttons work, I've never flicked a button like those buttons. They were absolutely extraordinary. But I mean, I don't know what to say to people. Calm down. It's not like Ferrari are stopping making cars with ridiculous, inefficient V12 engines that make an enormous amount of noise and there's no room for your shopping. This is a car where you can put 5 people in it, a load of stuff in the back. You could drive for hundreds of miles without thinking about charging. And when you do charge it, it'll take 5 minutes. It charges incredibly fast. So all that technology has moved on. I don't know how many people will buy it, 50 maybe, and they'll love it. And we'll see them on the road and you'll go, oh my God, that's that weird Ferrari. I think they look great.
Well, I hope you get to drive one. Take one for a test at some point. Robert Llewellyn, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme tonight. Robert is the host of the Everything Electric Show, the #1 electric vehicle programme, and you can watch it on YouTube and other platforms. Speaking of YouTube, we are going to come back to our conversation about the Prime Minister's proposed social media ban for the under-16s. Thomas has texted in to say we need a ban on bad parents, or at least a licensing scheme. No social media ban will work without proper controls, and that starts and ends with the parents. That's still to come here on LBC, but now with the time at 28 minutes to 10, the news headlines come from Katie Dartford.
Under-16s in the UK are on course to be banned from using social media by next spring. Many bereaved parents and safety campaigners say it's a watershed moment for child protection. Some tech giants warn a blanket ban could drive them into unregulated online spaces. Donald Trump says an agreement to end the US war with Iran is all signed and the Strait of Hormuz will be completely open by Friday. He said Tehran's committed not to have a nuclear weapon and this will be strongly policed. And yellow heat alerts have been issued for much of central and southern England as temperatures start to rise. They'll run from Wednesday until next Monday. LBC weather, cloud increasing this evening with showery rain in the north and west at times, clear spells elsewhere with lows of 8 to 16 degrees.
This is LBC.
Noticed a change in your hearing? Well, get a hearing check from Specsavers. Oh, not sure where to start? Well, we're very flexible.
Harassment they face online and at school. Call me and tell me what you think of this social media ban. You can call me at 0345 6060 973 or text 84850, and we'll come back to those calls and texts in just a moment. But next this evening, I wanted to spend some time remembering Roger Cook. If the name doesn't mean much to you, he was an extraordinary broadcaster who died today at the age of 83. And if you were listening to the radio in the 1970s or watching television in the 1980s and 90s, chances are you are familiar with Mr. Cook's work.
My name's Roger Cook from BBC Television. Would you mind, there's certain questions that really ought to be answered about the antiques that you're passing off, the fakes that you're passing off as the real thing. There are a lot of very important questions to ask.
It was always like that. Born in New Zealand, raised in Australia, he moved to Britain in the late 1960s and began a career that would establish him as an indefatigable defender of consumers who felt they had been ripped off and an enemy of villains across the spectrum. His combative style was developed after he started presenting the programme Checkpoint that he had conceived for BBC Radio 4. He then moved to television, where his efforts to track down con artists, fraudsters, paedophiles and other villains would invariably put him at considerable risk.
Mr. Harris invited me to step outside and talk things through, but his means of communication proved to be a metal bar.
Are you?
He then went for the camera crew, and I tried to calm him down and head him off. It didn't work, and I can only say that if you've bought a plastic replica via Mr. Harris, believing you bought the real thing, complaints don't seem to be treated very sympathetically.
It was an approach that attracted millions of viewers, resulted in Roger Cook receiving death threats, broken ribs, even on one occasion being run over by a car. He was widely credited with inventing the doorstep interview that today sees many reporters chasing down their quarry in a variety of circumstances and places worldwide.
I'm told I was the first to do this confrontation of villains in this way. I didn't like doing it. I absolutely loathed it. But it had to be done. If you were going to do the job, you had to do it properly, and that meant confronting the villain and showing him up for what he was in front of his victims who were watching the programme. And if they didn't get anything back, if their money had been stolen for good, at least they got the satisfaction of seeing him being brought to book. And that's what drove us.
Roger Cook, whose death was announced today at the age of 83. With me now to talk about him is my colleague, LBC's crime correspondent, Andy Hughes. Andy, thanks very much for being with us tonight. I gather that you were not only a Roger Cook fan, but in many ways are one of those reporters, and there are lots of them all over the world, who emulate some of the work that he did. I mean, the doorstep is absolutely part and parcel of your work every single day for LBC, for the global podcast, The Crime Agents. But tell me about when Roger Cook first came to your attention.
Oh, Simon, what can I say about Roger Cook? Just hearing those clips that you've just played out, the nostalgia that brings to me is incredible. I remember being a young kid in Gateshead, and the Cook Report, which was one of his flagship shows, was one of the staples in our house. It was one of the things that we all used to get excited about. And really watching him on that show, that made me want to be an investigative journalist. Without a doubt, without him and watching him in my youth, I would not be doing what I am doing today. And what was that show about? Well, it was about exposing criminality. It was about exposing wrongdoing. But it wasn't just doing that. It was the way he did it. And you referenced it at the start. It was this doorstepping technique. Just to let our viewers and listeners know what that is, it is a journalistic technique where you confront someone who you've been investigating. And it is the main moment of any investigation. And this is one thing I really learned from him, which was certainly in broadcast journalism, probably more than newspaper journalism, it is all about moments, this game. You will know this, Simon. It's about moments. It's about a confrontation. It might be revealing something. And Roger Cook was the absolute master of confrontation. And everything he was about accountability. And this is why he had viewers in their millions. I think at the top of his game, he had 10 million viewers a show, which nowadays is unthinkable. And it was all about the confrontation. It was all about that main moment. And the way he did it, it was just so fearless. He put himself in very dangerous situations time after time after time. And it kind of transcended journalism in a way. His shows were entertainment as well. I mean, listen, I think we both know, Simon, you couldn't get away with what he did then, now. I mean, he was just storming into properties, going after people. It was the thing about him. It was just so engaging and so enthralling. And he has inspired not only me, but hundreds of other journalists like me to do what we do.
There was a physicality about him as well, Andy, because he was a big, burly fella. And if he showed up on your doorstep, He in that antiques shop that I played the excerpt from. I mean, he just storms right on in, and the antique shop owner then calls the police, but then ultimately decides to take the law into his own hands with really brutal impacts on Roger Cook. But he was a big guy.
Yeah, he was, Simon, and he just wasn't afraid. I was actually really so I'd never heard that clip that you played of him saying he disliked doing that. I would have thought he would have loved doing that. I certainly loved doing that. And yeah, I mean, the situations he got himself in, you mentioned the antique stealer, but he confronted so many criminals and exposed their wrongdoing in such a engaging way. And this is why he is such a legend of our game. And I teach young investigative journalists in university, and the thing I always ask them to do is go back and watch Roger Cook's films, go back and watch his investigations. Obviously, they're so young, they've never heard of him, right? But we certainly have, and his legacy lives on through the hundreds of journalists who are just repeating what he did so successfully for so many decades.
Andy Hughes, LBC's crime correspondent, host of the global podcast The Crime Agents, emulating Roger Cook on a daily basis for us. Thanks very much indeed for joining the programme tonight and remembering Roger Cook, whose death was announced today at the age of 83. We are going to continue until 10 o'clock tonight, and we're going to talk about the Prime Minister's proposed ban on social media. What's your view of it? I know many of you earlier on in the evening were exchanging views, some of you backing it, some of you arguing it doesn't go far enough, and some of you outraged, saying this is the thin end of a wedge that is going to lead to the government knowing too much about all of us and potentially tracking people. Call me at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. In a moment, we are going to be hearing from one parent who is supportive of this ban and another caller who thinks that it doesn't go far enough. The time here on LBC coming up to 9:45.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
Keir Starmer announces a long-awaited ban on social media for children, but will it achieve anything? Plus, 1 in 6 Brits think the growing Muslim population's a threat to our culture. What's going on there?
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
England's first game. That's one of our favourite things. And while England get ready to take on Croatia, you can get
behaviours that I'm hearing through the radio and seeing around me. There are lots of addicts to social media, and I mean millions. There's a dependency that's developed that's huge. If you ask most people, do you go a day without visiting Facebook or sending a text or viewing it? They look at it as if you're crazy. If you took their phones away from them, it's a device dependency, and we know the drugs involved are just like other alcoholic drugs, the dopamine, the quick release, the immediate gratification, the phenomenon of craving. It's all there, and it's millions of us. I'm not saying that everyone's a nutty far-blown addict, but there are tens of millions of people with a dependency problem, and the people who are trying to fix it are dependent themselves half the time.
Well, I mean, I would argue, Matt, that it's far more than tens of millions of people. I mean, I'm lucky I travel all over the world on a continuing basis, and whether I am in Washington, D.C., or whether I am in London, or whether, as I was a few weeks ago, I'm in Beijing and I'm riding the local underground systems or using public transportation, I mean, it is absolutely extraordinary to see everyone now routinely on their phones all the time. I was thinking about it this morning because I remember when I first saw this happening, and it was actually here in London, before social media, but when everybody was beginning to start sending SMS texts to one another. And we didn't really have much of that in the United States at the time. But actually here in London, I remember getting on an underground train and looking at all these kids who were sending texts constantly. And I thought, what is that all about? Because even then that appeared like addictive behavior. And to my eyes, coming from Washington, D.C., which is where I'm based, I had not seen that in the United States before, and remember thinking to myself, is that coming to the United States next? And of course, not only did it come to the United States, but it then went, exponential in the United States. But what do you do about this? Because it is an addiction. So what do you think governments should be doing?
Well, this is the thing. This is the wonderful and horrible thing about, accepting that it's a dependency at least, and for many, many, many an addiction. Is that's the bad news, you're an addict. But the good news is you now know you're an addict. So you can kind of stop blaming everybody else apart from yourself completely. Even though Elon Musk and the government and everyone have played a part, and you can start focusing on your part, because you suddenly realize that, with the parents, there's so many parents who are on devices themselves and pass the pacifier to their child.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might get angry at those parents, but then when you remember that they're addicts too, you can look at them differently. You can realize that and what we're doing is avoiding addressing our own dependency. Ultimately, that's the only solution. It isn't that these other people haven't played a part, won't play a part, but it's our responsibility to admit that we're addicts, and then we realize that we're kind of powerless. And then you don't get into this halfway house. You realize that there is no halfway house of addiction. You either get off this stuff, or you keep on relapsing and having a day where you think you're doing, and then, like everything else, you ask if you take a phone away from them for a week and they get back on it, and they hit it harder than ever. The addiction hasn't gone anywhere.
But do you think, Matt, that this is a matter of individual responsibility, or do you think that this is government action in conjunction with individual responsibility that can improve the situation over the short term for the under-16s and then maybe find ways of helping all the rest of us?
Well, I do absolutely agree that there's an acute problem that we can surely do more about. But the underlying problem that won't go away until we really realize quite how bad things are is that issue of dependency and the fact that so many of us are dependent. So our thinking is already irrational. We're already looking for reasons to keep our own behavior and blame somebody else's. The issue is A, B, or C. I don't text at 3 a.m, so I can't have a problem, and so on and so on. But ask someone to go a day without. And see what happens. I
don't even have to ask anybody else. I can just ask myself to do it, because partly through work, I'm on it all the time, as well as everything else. Matt, thanks very much indeed for your call. That was Matt in Oxford. Let's go to Cambridge, and Ned is there this evening. Good evening, Ned.
Good evening, Simon. Lovely to speak to you again. Great show.
And to you too.
Always, sir.
Thank you very much.
Always great to speak. So I've got a couple of points, but I think there's no such thing as social media. It's like a Dragon's Den pitch. That's what you call it. What it is, it's a data collection system. It's run by a bespoke program that's based on your searching activity and your likes. It's right in front of you. Your likes, your shares. It goes into your feed. It's done by the algorithm. It's curated specially for you for this. I remember when Facebook came out and Twitter, because I'm old enough, and all the girls, when Facebook came out, all the girls were in my office were stalking their ex-boyfriends through it on the first day, and I just thought, this is the creepiest thing I've ever seen in all my life, and I'm not going anywhere near it. I was on Twitter when it first came out, and it was great. It's a bit like having sort of your email address or Stephen Fry's email address. You go, hi, son, what do you think? Oh, no, this is pretty interesting. What do you think about that? Think about it now. What is it actually for? I mean, who's using it? I mean, it destroys your attention span. It's completely unchecked. I mean, as someone of your calibre and your colleagues' calibre, you know that if you get news now, you've got to check it. You've got to make sure it's factual. I mean, people lie all day long, and they're addicted to this instant sort of, oh, he said this, she said that, he said the rest of it. And people say, well, I don't trust the mainstream media. But who owns the mainstream media? The mainstream media is Facebook, it is Twitter, it is Snapchat. I mean, if you read the terms and conditions for TikTok, the people that are saying, oh, well, you know, the government, I mean, mate, they've already got your address. I mean, if you've got an Alexa in your house, you idiot, it's listening to you all day long. You've got your email, they've got your credit card, they've got your bank details, they've got...
I mean, that as you heard earlier in the programme, Ned, perhaps, I mean, that's very much my view. They're already all over us. I mean, really? I mean, signing up for age verification is somehow going to empower them, whoever the them is, in a way that they're not already empowered?
No, exactly. I mean, we know how incompetent government are anyway. I mean, we can't, you know, do you think they've got all day long to just go, oh, well, look at this. I mean, this is what Facebook does. I mean, I work in the media. I mean, everything is sold now on the open market. Your data, your browsing history, your, you know, what you're looking, your clicks, your likes, your shares, how many followers you've got. I mean, that goes across media, across the industry,
totally.
Advertising is all to do with that. I mean, you couldn't start Private Eye today and say, well, I've got Willie Rushton and, you know, and Paul Foot and you know, and Peter Cook, and we've got these amazing minds, and we do this magazine and the rest of it. They'd say, well, how many followers have you got? Otherwise, I'm not going to publish it. You know, and this is the whole thing that we're in. So, you know, I don't. If you actually look at what it is, it's destroying your attention span anyway, and the kids, because it's all 30 seconds. You're constantly scrolling for the next hit, and it's full of trolls, abuse, government propaganda. I mean, we wouldn't get MAGA without...
Absolutely agreed, Ned. And one question that has gone undiscussed largely today is why the government and its members of parliament are still using, for example, Elon Musk's platform. Someone, I think Andrew Marr was saying earlier in the evening, you know, the announcement when it was made was actually largely made over X, which is extraordinary. Ned, thanks very much indeed for calling the programme. I want to end tonight with a call about Roger Cook, because Ed has called us from Hounslow this evening. Good evening to you, Ed. You, I think, knew Roger Cook, used to work with him.
Well, no, I didn't work with him, but yes, good evening, Simon. No, I was involved in one of the programmes. The programme in question ended up being discussed in the House of Commons. Also on the programme, the then Speaker of the House, Bernard Weatherall, took part, and I was merely a witness to various things that had gone on, you know. And, yeah, it was a fantastically unique style of journalism, which, believe it or not, still pertains today in the shape of, you may or may not have known of, Geza Terjani. But these days, if you do what Roger Cook used to do, you now end up being charged and having to go to court. In Geza's case, he had to go to 2 court cases being charged in relation to doing what Roger used to do. Fortunately, in one of them, which was at Isleworth Crown Court, a 4-day trial, I sat through the whole thing, he was acquitted. Unfortunately, the other one, Westminster Magistrates Court, he wasn't acquitted and faced penalties for his journalistic efforts. But
well, and presumably what you're talking about, Ed, and I was watching back some of those old Roger Cook archive episodes today, it is extraordinary the extent to which he just steamed into places which you could not do today.
Well, Geza does. The 2 people is one, Matt Hancock. He did the same thing. He confronted him, and Sajid Javid. Both of them, and it resulted in court cases with both.
Right. So, I mean, you couldn't do it today without the threat of significant legal action being taken against you. Whereas in the case of that antiques shop episode that I ran a clip from, I mean, the antique shop owner who ends up going after Roger Cook with a metal bar does call the police, and this is all filmed on camera. era. But it was long after Roger Cook had walked into the shop saying, I've got a transcript here of allegations made against you. You've got questions to answer. That just would not play out like that today in large measure, certainly without significant legal actions resulting from it.
Well, he was one of a kind, wasn't he? And as I say, we're fortunate we have at least one person in on our side that still does that kind of thing.
Well, if people want to see more of Roger Cook, and you may do as well, Ed, there's lots of it on YouTube. There's a whole Roger Cook channel, which is where I was finding some of that material, including Roger Cook's own commentary on the role that he played in the history of the television medium. Ed in Hounslow, thanks very much indeed for calling in with your thoughts on Roger Cook, which wraps up tonight's programme. I will be back with you tomorrow night at 7, then again on Wednesday and Thursday, and all of next week too, as Ian Dale takes a well-earned break. Thanks for all of your calls and messages. If you missed any of this evening's programme, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download the LBC app for free from your app store. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Richard Spur. But right now, Ben Kentish.
Simon, thank you very much indeed. Hello there. A very, very good evening this Monday night. Late Nights with Ben Kentish here on LBC. Welcome to the programme.